Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Modern Family. New life. The stadium was packed, buzzing with energy and anticipation. The lights shone brightly, illuminating the field like a stage set for a grand performance. The crowd's cheers and applause echoed through the air, creating a deafening roar. The scoreboard read 2,825. This was the final play, the one that would determine the state champion. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked around. He locked eyes with the coach, who nodded at him. The pressure was immense, but he felt ready. The fate of the game, and perhaps his life, rested on this play. They needed a touchdown to win, and every eye was on him. Great players stand out in great and difficult moments, Ethan repeated to himself as he put on his helmet. This was a phrase his late grandfather never tired of saying. Winning the state championship would be the first step toward his dream of going pro and one day winning the Super Bowl. He knew college scouts were in the stands, watching his every move, every decision. He took a deep breath and began issuing instructions. The choices were clear: a quick pass or trying to run it himself. He analyzed the Raptors' defensive formation. There was a small gap, but it was risky. Speed was never his strength. His precise passes and decision-making were his trademarks. He couldn't afford a hasty decision now. Set, hut, Ethan shouted, and the ball snapped into his hands. Time seemed to slow as he scanned the field. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his chest. He felt like he couldn't breathe. What the hell, Ethan thought, nearly falling to his knees from the pain, but he gritted his teeth and kept searching for a pass. Just before being tackled by a giant defender weighing 200 pounds or more, he threw the ball with precision and speed toward his star receiver. As he hit the ground, slowly losing consciousness, he heard the one word that brought him peace: touchdown. A faint smile crossed his lips, knowing his team had won. That was his last thought before darkness consumed him completely. He died of a damn heart attack and didn't even have time to see his life flash before his eyes. He had to focus on making that pass. If he'd failed, not only would his team have lost, but they would have suffered the loss of one of their players. At least he gave them joy before he died. The downside was that he couldn't keep his promise. The darkness was endless. His consciousness seemed to drift through a shadowy world, carried as if part of an invisible current. Thinking was hard, as if he were both aware and unaware at the same time. It was a limbo where time and space didn't exist, only an infinite abyss. As his mind sank deeper into that darkness, a flash of memory began to take shape. Great players stand out in great and difficult moments. Ethan, promise me you'll always fight, no matter what happens. Ethan, who looked about 10 years old, stood staring at his grandfather lying in a hospital bed. His grandfather had more wrinkles than ever, barely any hair, and his expression was no longer as cheerful as usual. An aura of frailty surrounded him. "Yes, Grandpa," Ethan said, his eyes filled with tears as he wiped his nose with his hand. I'll win the Super Bowl. Not one, not two, three, or more. I'll bring it to your grave in your honor, old man," Ethan added, trying not to cry. In Texas, they didn't cry. "Haha, that's the spirit. But don't count me out just yet," Richard said with a faint smile. That memory, that promise, burned in his mind like a beacon in the darkness. He felt his consciousness dimming, slipping into a deep slumber, but the promise he had made to his grandfather kept him tethered to reality. His will grew stronger, fighting against the dark current trying to pull him away. Suddenly, he felt a tug, a force dragging him toward the light. The darkness began to dissipate, and a warm sensation enveloped him. Ethan slowly opened his eyes, expecting to see the stadium, but instead, he found himself in a completely different place. There were no cheering crowds, no bright lights, only a white ceiling and warm sunlight streaming through a window. "Where am I?" Ethan thought, feeling an unfamiliar body. He raised his hands and saw that they were much smaller than before. His heart raced as he looked around, trying to make sense of what had happened. He found himself in a hospital room. Around him were bright colors and complex electronic devices humming and beeping. The air was filled with the scent of disinfectant, and the hurried voices of medical staff echoed in the background. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his head. He raised his hand to the source and felt bandages wrapped around it. The memory of what had happened began to take shape in his mind. It was like reliving the moment in first person. He had been playing on a very tall tree, lost his balance, and hit his head hard. After that, everything went black. All he could hear were frantic voices shouting the same name, Andrew. Did I reincarnate? No, the owner of this body died, and I took his place or something like that, Ethan thought, a confused look on his face. Through the memories he now shared with this body, he realized the fall had been fatal. Having spent so much time in that darkness and having experienced death, he understood that the 5-year-old boy named Andrew had died, and he had taken his place, though he couldn't comprehend how or why. Ethan, or now Andrew, remained silent, staring at his small, pale hands. Perhaps 10 or 20 minutes passed before he sighed and shook his head. This is like the online novels I used to read, Andrew thought. Despite being a quarterback, one of his hobbies was reading online novels and manga. A strange pastime for the best high school quarterback, but it was something only he knew and a hobby he genuinely enjoyed. Besides that, he was a huge fan of pop culture. But this is good, Andrew thought, clenching his fist tightly as a faint smile formed on his face. He had another chance to fulfill the promise he made to his grandfather. This time, he wouldn't fail, though, in truth, it wasn't him who failed, it was his heart that betrayed him. His only family had been his grandfather, Richard. After Richard's death, Ethan had been left completely alone. What allowed him to keep going and avoid falling into a depressive spiral was football and the promise he had made to Richard. Just as Andrew was starting to formulate plans in his mind, a nurse entered the room. "You're awake?" the nurse asked in a surprised tone, looking at the boy who was staring at his hands with a faint smile. In a narrow hospital hallway, 2 young men, barely in their 30s, were standing. Both had anxious and nervous expressions. "This can't be happening," exclaimed one of the men, a redhead with blue eyes. He paced back and forth in the hallway, stopping every few steps, turning around, and retracing his path, repeating the process countless times. The other man, more robust and clearly overweight, was sitting in one of the chairs with his hands resting on his head. He murmured things only he could hear. His forehead was covered in sweat, and his right leg was shaking uncontrollably. "Say something, Cam," the redhead exclaimed, desperate to hear words of comfort, even though doubt and fear still loomed large. The man called Cam looked up and took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "Everything will be fine, Mitchell," he replied, though his tone lacked any real conviction. "With that face of yours, I don't believe it," Mitchell shouted, his anxiety becoming more evident in his voice and gestures. "You're not helping either, pacing around and biting your nails," Cam shot back. "What do you want me to do? We're about to become the first gay couple in America to kill their kid just a week after adopting him," Mitchell yelled, raising his voice. "Don't say that, you'll jinx it, and calm down, for heaven's sake," Cam shouted, grabbing Mitchell by the collar. Mitchell's eyes widened in surprise, he'd never seen his partner so aggressive before. Cam was always like a big, cuddly teddy bear, full of love. "Excuse me, gentlemen," said a middle-aged man with black hair and outdated glasses, looking at the couple, who seemed on the verge of a full-blown argument. "Doctor, is the little teddy bear okay?" Cam asked, letting go of Mitchell and gripping the doctor's hand tightly. "Little teddy bear, yes, Mr. Tucker. Andrew is stable, if that's what you mean by little teddy bear. He's not showing any concerning symptoms after that big fall. We conducted a CT scan to check for internal injuries, and there are no signs of hemorrhaging or significant fractures," the doctor replied, trying to free himself from the strong grip of this large man. Cam nodded, visibly relieved. Mitchell stepped closer and asked, "What about his head? Did he need stitches? Is there any memory loss?" The doctor adjusted his glasses before responding. "Andrew suffered a significant head injury, which caused the bleeding you saw. We've stitched up the wound, and he's responding well to treatment. Regarding memory loss, it's common after a traumatic brain injury like the one he experienced. He might have temporary gaps or difficulty recalling the incident itself. Well, he's only been with us for a week, so we don't have to worry too much about the memories," Mitchell murmured, earning an elbow jab to the ribs from Cam. Just then, a nurse hurried into the hallway. "Mr. Tucker and Mr. Pritchett. Andrew has just woken up, you can go see him now. He's doing fine." "That's great," Cam exclaimed with a big smile. "Let's go, I can see how anxious you are. Follow me," said the doctor, leading the way. "Phew, everything turned out fine," Mitchell said, walking alongside Cam and placing a hand on his chest. His heart could finally stop racing. Seeing their newly adopted son lying on the ground with his head covered in blood and unconscious wasn't a pleasant memory. "Yes, I should let your family know. We wouldn't want them to have a meltdown like we did, Cam said. What? You told my family about this? Who? My father, my sister, my mother? Mitchell asked, his expression far from pleased. Your sister, Cam replied. Oh no, now she's going to look at me with that judgmental expression she always has when I mess things up. Why did you tell her? Now she'll think she's a better parent than me, Mitchell said in a complaining tone. I needed to talk to someone, and you weren't paying attention to me, Cam justified. Before Mitchell could continue arguing, they entered the room. At the far end, Andrew was lying on the hospital bed, staring out the window with an unreadable expression. Andrew, Cam exclaimed, about to run over and hug the little boy, but the doctor stopped him. Be careful, he's a patient and in recovery, the doctor said. If this man used the same strength as before, he feared he might harm the kid. Yes, sorry, Cam replied, moving closer to the bed along with Mitchell. Little. Before Cam could call Andrew by the nickname he had given him, Mitchell interrupted, let's call him by his name. Just in case his memory is still a bit off, he murmured, and Cam nodded slightly. Andrew, buddy, do you remember us? How are you feeling? Cam asked in a warm tone, kneeling down toward Andrew, who was staring at the couple. His eyes opened wide, which startled both Mitchell and Cameron a little. Mitchell and Cameron from Modern Family, Andrew thought, with clear surprise on his face. Modern Family was a comedy TV show with several seasons. He had watched it, though he hadn't seen all the episodes. He immediately recognized the two men in front of him. The gay couple, one of the protagonists of the show. New memories of his current body came to mind, causing him to touch his head again. They adopted Andrew a week ago, he thought, frowning slightly while touching his head. Family. Andrew was confused. Had he been reborn into a TV show? What the hell was this? Was he now a character being watched by unidentified people? Was this real? Andrew, are you okay? Cameron and Mitchell asked with worried faces. It wasn't pleasant to think about these things. He could accept reincarnation or transmigration, but accepting it in a world that, to him, was fictional, was strange, and he needed more time to process it. So, he stayed silent, watching Mitchell and Cameron, who were growing more concerned by the second as they received no answer and were met with Andrew's fixed gaze. Let me check him quickly, said the doctor, stepping toward Andrew with a professional but reassuring expression. The doctor took a small flashlight from his pocket and leaned in toward Andrew. Andrew, I need you to follow the light with your eyes, please, he said gently, moving the flashlight from side to side as he observed Andrew's pupils to make sure they responded properly to the light. Next, the doctor took his stethoscope and placed it on Andrew's chest, listening to his heartbeat and breathing. Breathe deeply for me, he requested, and Andrew obeyed, filling his lungs with air and then exhaling slowly. Finally, the doctor gently palpated around the wound on Andrew's head, making sure there was no unusual swelling or extreme tenderness. Do you feel pain here? He asked, watching for any reaction from Andrew. Andrew shook his head slowly. My head hurts a little, and I'm dizzy, he responded in a soft voice, still processing everything that was happening. The doctor nodded, satisfied with the evaluation. It's normal to feel some dizziness and a headache after a contusion like yours. It's important that you rest and avoid any strenuous activities for a while. We're going to keep you under observation, but it seems like you're recovering well. Cameron and Mitchell sighed with relief. Thank you, Doc. He remembers us, right? Mitchell asked. The doctor adjusted his glasses again, adopting a thoughtful expression. It's hard to say for sure at this moment. After a traumatic brain injury like what Andrew experienced, it's possible he has some memory gaps. Since he's only been with you for a week, it's likely that his recent memories are the most affected. Cameron nearly fainted, but managed to grab Mitchell's arm, who winced in pain but said nothing. Let's let him rest, the doctor said, escorting Mitchell and Cameron out of the room. He then told the nurse to bring Andrew something to drink. This is a nightmare, Cameron said, collapsing into one of the ugly hospital chairs. The nightmare's over. Andrew is fine, Mitchell said, not worried about the memory loss. He doesn't remember us, Mitch. Our little one doesn't know who we are, Cameron said, exasperated. What's the problem? He only lived with us for a week. Actually, he didn't even make it to a full week. 6 days, 23 hours, and 45 minutes, Mitchell said, glancing at the time on his wristwatch. We lost all the beautiful memories we made in that time, Cameron said. Beautiful memories. The kid barely talks to us, he prefers to spend all his time playing alone in the yard. Mitchell said, sitting next to Cameron. Are you okay? Cameron asked, noticing Mitchell's expression. I don't know. Did we do the right thing? Mitchell asked. What do you mean? Cameron asked, raising an eyebrow. Adopting Andrew. He's already 5, he was the youngest we could get. It was a miracle to adopt a kid as a gay couple. Mitchell answered in a quiet tone. Don't get scandalized, I see your face changing, Mitchell quickly added. I mean, the kid is so quiet, he barely makes a sound. I think 5 years is too much. I thought an orphaned child would be happy to be adopted, but now he has 2 dads, I guess that's weird. Mitchell said. The kid is shy, it's normal. His life changed suddenly, he was only with us for a week, it's not enough time for him to feel comfortable and be more friendly with us. We need to give him time and approach him slowly, trying to be the best parents we can, Cameron said, resting his hand on Mitchell's. You're right, I don't know what I was thinking, Mitchell said. When he saw someone approaching them, he quickly pulled his hand away from Cameron's. Mitchell, Cameron said, noticing that Mitchell still had difficulty showing affection in public. Actually, he showed no affection in public. No hugs, no kisses, no holding hands. Luckily for Mitchell, at that moment, his sister Claire arrived with her husband Phil and their 2 daughters. What happened? Claire asked, having come as quickly as possible. She even brought Alex, who was a baby. 10 minutes later, both Claire and Phil sighed in relief upon learning that their new nephew was safe. How could you let a 5-year-old climb a 4-meter tree? Claire asked, looking specifically at Mitchell with a judgmental stare. Mitchell looked at Cameron and with his gaze seemed to say, I told you so. The kid is very adventurous, we got distracted for a moment and he was already up there. He's really good at climbing. His little arms have endurance, Cameron said. Have you told Dad? Claire asked. Seriously, I came out of the closet 4 years ago, and he still struggles to accept it. He'll never accept Andrew, an adopted child raised by a gay couple. He hasn't visited him once, Mitchell said, frowning. Don't be so harsh, it's only been a week since they adopted him, he probably hasn't had time to visit because of work. Claire said, not very sure of herself. Where's the doctor? Asked the same nurse from earlier, looking around with sweat on her brow. He went to attend another patient, I think. Mitchell replied. Did something happen to Andrew? Cameron asked, standing up from his seat. Yes, it's hard to explain, it's better if you see it for yourselves, the nurse replied, and everyone returned to the room where the boy was resting. What Mitchell, Cameron, and the Dunphys saw left them frozen in place. Even the little girl named Haley, who was 5 years old, stopped playing with her stuffed animal and looked toward the boy with jet black hair. Andrew was on the floor doing push-ups. His small face was covered in sweat as he counted the push-ups out loud. 10, 11, 12, Andrew exclaimed with determination, not noticing the presence of his new family. When I left he was on flex number 5. I tried to stop him, but he doesn't listen, the nurse said, unsure of what to do. She didn't want to grab the boy and put him back in bed, she was afraid of hurting his head or something and being blamed for it. Andrew, what are you doing? Cameron asked, approaching. 13, Andrew exclaimed, stopping and holding the plank position for a moment before turning his head toward Cameron. Exercise to clear my mind, Andrew replied, and then resumed doing push-ups. He felt pain in his arms, which trembled like jelly, and a burning sensation in his abdomen. The pain was real, he was alive, that's a good thing, but it's not the time, Cameron said after a few seconds, not expecting that response. You better go back to bed, Andrew. You need to fully recover, and you're doing the opposite of what the doctor said, Mitchell said, taking on the role of the bad dad. No, I still have 86 more push-ups to go, Andrew said, returning his focus to his exercise. Cameron and Mitchell exchanged nervous looks. They didn't know how to proceed. Should they scold him and put him to bed, even though he was exercising? Leave it to me, I have more experience dealing with kids, I know how to handle this, Phil said with a kind smile, patting Cameron and Mitchell's shoulders. Really? Cameron asked. Yep, just watch and take notes. I'm the cool dad, Phil said, walking over to Andrew and crouching down to get closer. What's up, buddy? Phil asked, looking at Andrew. Phil, Andrew thought, glancing up for a second before going back to looking at the floor. He couldn't speak or he'd lose the energy he needed for his push-ups. An awkward silence filled the room. The only sound was Andrew's labored breaths. Phil felt the weight of everyone's stares on his back, but he kept smiling confidently. He kept trying to start a conversation with the boy, but none of his efforts worked. "Why are you ignoring my daddy?" Haley asked, her cheeks puffed out. She didn't like at all that her father was being ignored. Andrew again ignored everything and continued with his push-ups. "Bad boys get punished," Haley exclaimed, puffing out her cheeks in anger for being ignored. Before anyone could stop her, Haley stretched out her little leg and kicked Andrew in the right rib. Andrew lost his balance from the pain near his stomach and fell to the floor, his arms giving way. "Ouch," he cried, rolling on the ground. "Haley," Claire exclaimed, horrified by what her little daughter had just done. Her nephew had just been saved from death, and now he was receiving a kick to the ribs. "Andrew," Mitchell and Cameron shouted, rushing to the boy who was rolling on the floor. "I need to finish my training," Andrew said, gritting his teeth and pushing the pain aside. This had to be a dream. It couldn't be true that he was now living in a TV show. Once he lost all his strength, he'd wake up in his previous life with his friends, still a state champion. The scouts would have seen his incredible performance in the final game and would offer him scholarships from the best universities. A university with a major sports program would give him a scholarship and he would soon play in the NFL. "I'll be a champion, yes, champion," Andrew muttered to himself with a half-manic expression. "Of course not, young man. It's time to get back to bed and rest as you should," Mitchell said with a furrowed brow in an authoritative tone. "Leave me alone, I'm fine," Andrew yelled, struggling and trying to escape his parents' grasp. In the midst of the chaos and the struggle, as Cameron and Mitchell tried to get Andrew back to bed, his head hit a hard part of the bed frame. "Ouch," Andrew exclaimed before losing consciousness again, going limp in Phil and Mitchell's arms. The room fell into stunned silence for a moment before Cameron let out a nervous chuckle. "Well, now rest well, Andrew," he said as he gently laid him back in bed and covered him up. "Haley, you can't kick people like that," Claire said, trying to teach her daughter a lesson. Haley crossed her arms, still upset. "HMPH, I was just helping." Phil sighed, looking at the doctor, who had returned just in time to witness the disaster. "Well, Doc, can you do anything else for him?" The doctor adjusted his glasses, looking at the unconscious child. "I think a little more rest should be enough this time. Can we wait here until he recovers?" Cameron asked with pleading eyes. "Yes, as long as you don't cause him more harm than he already has," the doctor said, leaving the room after doing a quick checkup on Andrew. Andrew slowly opened his eyes. He felt the pain in his head again. Everything is real, he thought, with a strange look as he noticed Mitchell, Cameron, Phil, Claire, Haley, and baby Alex in the room. They were all sleeping uncomfortably in the chairs. The only one awake was Haley, playing with two stuffed animals. Andrew thought it could all be a bad dream, and he would wake up after pushing his body to the limit and fainting. Looks like they've been waiting a long time, Andrew thought, seeing everyone asleep. His new parents had their heads resting on his bed. Are they my new family? Andrew thought with a strange look on his face. He had watched Modern Family, and it was a show that made him laugh a lot. He had always been jealous of the family they showed on the show. He had always been alone with his grandfather. They weren't numerous, they only had each other. "Next time, don't ignore my daddy or you'll see," Haley said, noticing Andrew had woken up. Is a kick not enough? Andrew thought. "Yeah, I'm sorry," he said after a few seconds, offering a slight smile. He hadn't ignored Phil to make him feel bad, he just thought everything was a strange dream after his premature and sudden death. "Andrew, you're awake, do you feel okay?" Cameron asked, standing up. Mitchell and the others also approached, looking at him with concern. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Uncle Phil. I'm sorry for worrying everyone," Andrew said, trying to sound as natural as possible for a 5-year-old. Cameron became emotional hearing Andrew call him Dad for the first time. His eyes filled with tears as he smiled proudly. "Oh, Andrew, we're so happy you're okay," he said, hugging him tightly. Andrew felt the warmth and sincerity of Cameron's hug. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a family again. A new chance to be happy, not just for himself, but also to fulfill the promise he made to his grandfather. "Group hug," Phil said with a smile, gesturing for everyone to join in. Mitchell, Haley, Claire, and he enthusiastically surrounded Andrew. Andrew felt the warmth of his new family, but he was running out of air from being hugged by so many people. "I can't breathe," Andrew murmured, and everyone quickly separated. "Oops, sorry, buddy," Phil said, laughing nervously. "Yeah, we don't want to suffocate you right after you recover," Claire added, patting Andrew's head. Mitchell and Cameron exchanged glances, smiling at the scene. "See, it wasn't bad telling your sister. They're family," Cameron said, and Mitchell nodded with a slight smile. The incident seemed to have improved their relationship with Andrew, their adopted son. Maybe not everything was negative today. 26 comments, 0 vote. Training. A week had passed since Ethan transmigrated into the world of Modern Family in the body of a 5-year-old boy named Andrew. He had already been discharged from the hospital and returned home with his 2 new parents. Mitchell and Cameron's house was the same as in the show. However, not all exactly the same as Andrew remembered from the show. Mitchell and Cameron were younger, and from what Andrew remembered from the series, they would adopt Lily between 2007 and 2010, although he did not know exactly when. The difference was that they were in 1999. The timeline was different compared to the show, and he was the same age as Haley, the daughter of the Dunphys, and his new cousin. Andrew was born on June 24, 1994 and was in July 1999, so he turned 5 years old a few days ago. Haley was born on December 10, so she was still 4 years old. He didn't understand why there were such changes in the timeline, but it didn't matter to him. He had learned firsthand that this was real. His dream was the same as in his past life, to win the Super Bowl and fulfill the promise he made to his grandfather, Richard. When he saw Claire in the hospital, he noticed that her stomach was very swollen. Luke should be born in a few months. As for Alex, she should be 2 or 3 years old by now. "I can be a better quarterback than before," Andrew thought, holding a small pink teddy bear with a heart on its stomach. He was in his new room, which was very peculiar. The walls were painted in shades of pink and decorated with a hand-painted mural by Cameron, depicting a field of flowers with butterflies fluttering around. The bed, covered with a vibrant quilt featuring princesses and unicorns, took center stage in the room. In one corner, there was a bookshelf filled with fairy tales and adorable stuffed animals. When Andrew first saw his room, he had a look of surprise and confusion. It looked like a girl's room. He would need to make some adjustments to reflect his own tastes: posters of football, Star Wars merchandise, and other things. "I need to create a workout suited to my small body. I can't overexert myself," Andrew thought as he sat down on a small chair. He grabbed a piece of paper and a colored pencil and began thinking about what would be the best workout for a 5-year-old. First, he needed to get used to his new body. He had to develop his coordination and agility. He could run through small obstacles to improve his agility and start getting used to his body. After all, kids do that, right? Run and play like crazy all day. Andrew got up and started planning his workout. He looked around and decided to use the toys and stuffed animals in his room to create a mini obstacle course. He started lining up the stuffed animals on the floor, creating a diagonal line. He spaced them about a foot apart to have enough room to run between them. Once everything was set up, he began stretching to avoid injuries and warm up a bit. "Okay, let's get started," Andrew murmured with a smile. He ran through the stuffed animals, zigzagging between them. He did the course several times, gradually increasing his speed with each pass. At one point, the door suddenly opened, and Andrew, running at his maximum speed, got distracted and tripped, falling to the ground with a thud. The fall was soft, and he barely felt any pain. This was nothing compared to all the tackles he had endured during his career as a quarterback. Cameron, who had opened the door, hurried inside. "Andrew, are you okay?" he asked, a mix of concern and surprise as he saw the strange arrangement of toys in the room. Andrew sat up, laughing. "Yeah, this is nothing," he said with a small smile. Cameron sighed in relief but couldn't help but smile. "You're a real warrior, huh? Look what I got you," he said, pulling a football from a bag he was holding. Although it wasn't real, it was rubber. "Great, thanks, Dad," Andrew exclaimed, taking the rubber ball and holding it as if it were his baby. He felt the texture of the ball in his hands. He missed that feeling, even though it wasn't the same as a real football. "He called me Dad again," Cameron thought with smile. It was the second time Andrew had done that since the hospital. If it were up to Andrew, he wouldn't call Cameron Dad, but he would feel bad and guilty if he didn't. He knew both of them were really good people, and they cared a lot about having a good relationship with their son. Andrew had to act a bit like a 5-year-old and make his parents happy. As for his enthusiastic and passionate attitude, that was always how he was. "Let's throw some passes outside," Andrew said, starting to march toward the yard. His dad, Cameron, was good at football. He played in college as a starting offensive lineman. "I wonder if Jack is okay," Andrew thought, a nostalgic look in his eyes. It had only been a week, but he already missed his best friend. A lineman who always protected him so he could make his passes. During a passing play, the offensive linemen have to block defenders trying to reach the quarterback. The offensive line forms a pocket around the quarterback to give him time to throw the ball without being sacked. If you don't have good offensive linemen protecting you, it's going to be really tough as a quarterback. Andrew, or rather, Ethan, lived through a time when his offensive line sucked. That's why he got tackled so many times, but it also helped him improve his passing and reaction times. "Come on, little one. I'll teach you how to throw a football," Cameron said with a smile. Cameron thought that Andrew's sudden interest in football was because he watched games live or on replay, and the little one had accompanied him a few times. "It's good that we have things in common. I hope he still likes football, even if he's not good at it," Cameron thought as he walked toward the backyard. He knew about the immense competitiveness in the sport. Not everyone had talent, that was a fact. He wasn't sure if Andrew had talent or not. They reached the backyard, and Cameron positioned himself not too far from Andrew, but to his surprise, the boy started moving farther away. "That far, little one?" Cameron asked, not believing that Andrew had the strength and precision to throw the ball to his position. Andrew smiled confidently. "No problem, trust me." Cameron raised an eyebrow but said nothing. After being called Dad again, he couldn't say that he didn't trust him. Andrew focused on Cameron, calculating the distance and adjusting the necessary strength. The distance wasn't much, though it might be for an average 5-year-old. But since it was a rubber ball, he wouldn't have a problem. Finally, Andrew threw the ball with great precision, though he could improve if he got more used to his new body. The ball flew through the air in a perfect trajectory and landed directly in Cameron's hands. "Wow, Andrew, that was incredible. How did you learn to throw so well?" Cameron exclaimed, smiling widely. "I don't know, I just did it," Andrew said, scratching his cheek, not sure how to respond. It wasn't that hard of a pass, it was straight and not far, and no one was guarding them. Talent, thought Cameron, though he forced himself to calm down. It was just one pass, maybe it was luck. His passing session continued for a long time. Andrew never got tired, and he didn't miss a single pass or catch. This is no coincidence anymore, thought Cameron with a big smile. His son had talent. He hadn't seen any 5-year-old, though he didn't know many, throw a ball with such precision and never miss once. Time passed. It was vacation, and Andrew took advantage of it to continue training and preparing his body. On September 1st, he would start kindergarten, the preparatory year before first grade. He was enrolled in the same one as Haley. He had no choice but to attend. During this time, he saw his uncles and cousins. He tried to be a good cousin, but he couldn't handle it for long. He got Haley to play football with him, which was hard to convince her to do, but he managed. With luck, the little girl could catch a pass, and even less so throw the ball with precision like he did, but she had fun, and his relationship with his new cousin improved. The vacation ended. During this time, he didn't meet Jay, his grandfather, Mitchell and Claire's father. He didn't care much. He knew Jay was a tough, old-fashioned man. He was still processing that his son was gay, had a partner, and had adopted a 5-year-old child who wasn't his blood. Andrew had already had a grandfather in his past life, and he didn't feel the need for another. He only wanted to meet him because he had seen him on the show, that was all. Early on a Monday morning, Cameron was preparing breakfast for Andrew. Mitchell was sitting, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. "Go wake up the little one," Cameron said. "You'd better do it," said Mitchell. Cameron stopped what he was doing and looked at him. "Do you want me to do everything? He's your son, just go and wake him up. It's not that hard. The boy will want to be woken up by you. You're the one who always wakes him up. He's already called you, Dad, several times." "He hasn't called me that once," said Mitchell with a downcast expression. "Mitch, don't feel bad about it. He'll call you, Dad, any time now. Andrew is a very kind boy, he just hasn't had the chance since you don't play with him like I do," said Cameron, trying to cheer him up. I can't play with him because I work all day. Plus, he loves football. My dad always wanted me to play and I never liked it, said Mitchell with a grimace. You don't have to share the same interests to get along. Go wake him up. I'm sure he'll wake up with a big smile, said Cameron. Fine, said Mitchell, standing up and walking toward Andrew's room. 21 comments 0 vote. First birthday, June 24, 2000. Andrew's time in kindergarten had ended just a few weeks ago, much to his relief. It was vacation time again, and almost a year had passed since he transmigrated into this new body. Spending 4 hours a day with 5-year-old boys and girls was challenging for Andrew. In his past life, he had been 16 when he had a heart attack and transmigrated into this new body. He was essentially the babysitter for dozens of kids his age. He couldn't say no to them. The only upside was that he could organize teams to simulate a football game, using stuffed animal footballs and playing touch football, where tagging an opponent counted as a tackle. His training was going well. In addition to improving his agility and coordination, he focused on basic strength training, push-ups and squats using his own body weight, keeping the repetitions low and prioritizing proper form. He also did exercises like knee planks and lying leg raises to strengthen his core. He listened to his young body and was very careful. He also worked on improving his speed, which was already very good. He couldn't remember how fast he had been at 5 years old in his past life, but he felt this body had better genetics in that regard, something that would only make him a more complete player. Today was his 6th birthday. It was summer. The day was sunny and cloudless, perfect for celebrating. He was woken up by Cameron and Mitchell, who brought him breakfast in bed. Little by little, he was getting used to how affectionate and good parents they were. He had lost his grandfather Richard when he was just 10 years old. After that, he ended up with some old friends of his grandfather's who barely paid him any attention. He didn't blame them, they gave him food and shelter, and that was enough for him. Also, his grandfather wasn't exactly affectionate or, how to put it, gay, not using the term in a bad way, of course. Richard showed his affection differently, playing catch with him, watching games, taking him to the stadium, scaring him, watching movies together, or through playful roughhousing, love punches, like Garp, Luffy's grandfather, but maybe not as extreme. After breakfast, they gave him his birthday present, an official NFL football. He finally had a real ball with the weight he was used to. Thanks, Dads, Andrew said with a big smile, hugging Mitchell and Cameron, who happily accepted the embrace. It was obvious you wanted it. You're always watching games and playing with your rubber ball, Mitchell said with a smile, noticing how Andrew admired the football. I'm going to practice in the backyard, Andrew said enthusiastically, jumping out of bed. Change first. Your friends and family will be arriving soon. You need to look presentable, Mitchell said. Andrew looked at his clothes. He was still wearing his pajamas, which had lots of Darth Vader helmets on them. He was a big Star Wars fan. Hee, right, Andrew said with a sheepish smile, scratching his black hair, a little embarrassed for not being able to control his excitement. How cute, Cameron and Mitchell thought, seeing Andrew's smile. Their son was absolutely adorable when it came to football. Cameron and Mitchell left the room while Andrew changed out of his pajamas. He put on a plain white t-shirt, denim shorts, and black sneakers. I'm still not used to this little face, Andrew thought, looking at himself in the mirror. His hair was black and messy, giving him a slightly rebellious yet adorable look for his age. His eyes were green, and his left eyebrow had a visible notch. This was from the fall he'd taken almost a year ago, the one that nearly killed him, or rather, where the real Andrew had died. Well, time to play, Andrew murmured enthusiastically, grabbing the football and heading out of his room toward the backyard. He had to take advantage of this time before the kids started clinging to him and forcing him to play with them. Is all the food ready? Mitchell asked, glancing at the clock nervously. Yes, there are so many kids, Andrew sure has a lot of friends, Cameron said with a proud smile. With each passing day, Cameron felt prouder of Andrew, and the same was true for Mitchell. Their son was kind, enthusiastic, and energetic. He had many friends and, on top of that, an extraordinary talent for football. Only a blind person wouldn't see it. Mitchell turned his head and, through the window, saw Andrew throwing the football from over 15 meters away, passing it through a small hoop. Recently, with his parents' help, Andrew had hung several hula hoops at different heights and distances using ropes tied to trees or anything else that could hold them. My hand isn't big enough, Andrew thought, a little annoyed but still happy to be using a real football. What 6-year-old can make a throw like that? Mitchell asked, still amazed despite having already seen his son's precise passes. Only our son, Cameron said with a smile. He understood more than Mitchell just how incredible Andrew's throwing ability was. Cameron believed Andrew had the skill level of some of the greatest quarterbacks teenagers, or perhaps he was overestimating his son's talent. Your parents are coming today, right? Cameron asked, and Mitchell's expression darkened. Yes, what a lovely coincidence that they'll both meet Andrew on the same day, Mitchell replied sarcastically. His mother, Dee, had been away on a trip and had just returned. Of course, she wanted to meet her new grandson, as well as her other grandson from Claire, Luke. His father, Jay, had been notably absent this whole time. He never visited or met Andrew, which angered Mitchell, though he didn't show it. Mitchell got along better with his mother since she was more accepting when he came out and introduced her to Cameron. Don't be so tense, it'll be a lovely family party, I hope, Cameron said, though with a hint of doubt. Mitchell's parents had been divorced for over 10 years and were now about to see each other again after such a long time. It wasn't planned for both of them to be at the birthday party, but Claire had convinced Jay to come without telling Mitchell that she'd also arranged for their mother to come. Andrew had been practicing his throws at the hoops for almost an hour. The only downside was that he had just one ball, so he had to go fetch it each time. But he made the most of it, running at full speed to retrieve it before repositioning himself. This way, he trained his speed, endurance, and accuracy. Look how much you've sweated, Cameron said with a slightly furrowed brow as he noticed Andrew's sweaty forehead. Sorry, Andrew said with a little laugh. I can't be mad at you, Cameron said with a smile, gently ruffling Andrew's hair. There's the birthday boy, an enthusiastic voice exclaimed. Andrew looked up and saw his Uncle Phil coming in with Claire. Each of them was pushing a cart. Little Haley was by their side, holding a gift. A smile spread across Andrew's face, but before he could greet everyone, Haley ran over and jumped to hug him tightly. Thanks to his training, he stayed on his feet and didn't even take a step back. Happy birthday, Andy, Haley shouted, hugging Andrew tightly. Andy was the nickname his cousin had given him. Hey, Haley, thanks, you're getting stronger every day, Andrew said with a kind smile, returning the hug. Unlike the Haley he'd seen in the show, this Haley was much more affectionate with her family, though she still had her strong-willed personality. That was because she wasn't a teenager yet. She was very close to her dad, Phil, and now to him. Over time, Andrew had become like an older brother to her, even though they were the same age. I told you to call me Hal. Have you forgotten? Haley said, puffing her cheeks and looking at Andrew. Of course not. I just wanted to tease you a little, Andrew replied with a playful smile. Mean, mean, mean. Haley repeated several times, lightly hitting Andrew, who just laughed. Speed equals 100, damage equals 0. Haha, I was just kidding, Hal, Andrew said. Haley, hearing the nickname she'd insisted he use, calmed down and smiled. You two get along so well, Claire said, watching her daughter and nephew with a smile. She'd been worried that Haley's strong-willed and stubborn personality might leave her without friends, but that wasn't the case. She'd become friends with Andrew and many other kids. Claire had also noticed that Andrew got along with all his classmates. He was a sort of leader who brought everyone together. Sweetheart, give him the gift, Phil reminded his daughter, who had started rambling to Andrew about random things and forgotten she was holding his present. Here you go, Andy, said Haley, extending her arms so Andrew could take the gift. Andrew took the gift and quickly unwrapped it. His eyes lit up with excitement when he saw a San Francisco 49ers jersey, a very famous football team in California. They had won 5 Super Bowls and had a rich tradition in the NFL. The jersey was his size and of excellent quality. Amazing. Thank you, Aunt Claire and Uncle Phil, Andrew exclaimed, hugging both of them, who returned the hug with smiles. It's nothing, buddy, Phil said, roughly ruffling Andrew's hair. When the hug ended, Andrew noticed Haley's expression, which clearly said, it's my turn now. Thank you too, Hal, Andrew said, and with no other choice, he hugged the girl, who hugged him back with all her strength. That's why he hesitated to hug her. Haley still didn't know how to control her strength. Her hugs were deadly, though, admittedly, they were a good treatment for back pain. Just then, the doorbell rang again. Mitchell opened the door, and in walked Grandma Dee, a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and light eyes. "Mother," murmured Claire with a decidedly unenthusiastic expression. Her current relationship with her mother was complicated. "Hello, everyone, it's been so long," Dee said with a bright smile and an animated tone. After greeting the adults, she greeted Haley, Alex, and little Luke with kisses, hugs, and a warm grandmotherly smile. "Mother, this is our son, Andrew. Andrew, this is your grandmother Dee," Mitchell said. "Oh, you must be Andrew. Mitchell spoke a lot about you in the letters he sent me." "Nice to meet you, little one," said Dee with a smile, patting Andrew's head in an odd manner. "I'm sorry I couldn't bring you a proper gift for the occasion. Because of the flights and all the bureaucracy, I didn't have the time," Dee said. "It's fine," Andrew replied with his usual smile. He could feel the distance Dee maintained and the difference she made between him and his other cousins, Haley, Alex, and Luke. It didn't bother or affect him. In the first place, he didn't like Dee's character on the TV show. He had transmigrated at 16 years old, so it wouldn't affect him if someone he barely knew didn't want to connect with him. Cameron shot Mitchell a sharp look, but just then, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was several of Andrew's classmates from kindergarten. With no other option, Andrew started playing with his classmates, acting as the older brother, making sure they didn't get hurt, and trying not to seem like the typical boring adult. 18 comments 0 vote, Grandpa J. Set, hut, shouted Andrew, and the new ball landed in his hands. Since there were almost 16 kids, he decided to organize a game, 8 versus 8. Well, technically, it was 8 versus 7, his team was short one player. The backyard was a bit small, but it was better than nothing for a little fun. Better this than playing boring 6-year-old games, he thought. A boy named Ralph, who was quite stocky, charged at Andrew, but Andrew dodged him effortlessly. If he wanted to, he could run past everyone and score with ease. It would be like a walk in the park. But that wasn't the point. He wanted these kids to enjoy football. To feel the thrill of playing, the excitement of scoring a touchdown, the joy of catching a pass, and the pride of making their first tackle. "Catch it, Archie," Andrew shouted, throwing the ball to a red-haired boy. He adjusted the force so Archie could catch it. The distance wasn't far, and the others weren't marking properly, so the pass was perfect. The real challenge was whether Archie could hold on to the ball and not let it slip. "I got it," said Archie, catching the ball with both hands. It almost slipped, but he managed to hold on and started running toward the goal line, scoring a touchdown. "Touchdown," Archie yelled, throwing the ball onto the grass with excitement. "Well done, now it's your turn, Reggie," Andrew said as he began organizing his team. It was harder than it seemed to get 6-year-olds with endless energy running at 150% to follow instructions. Reggie, a 6-year-old boy who was tall for his age and wore a confident expression, took the ball with determination. "I won't lose," he murmured, frowning. He wasn't going to lose to Andrew again, at least, in his mind, he thought they had a rivalry. "You'll beat him, Reggie," said a short, nervous-looking boy with outdated glasses. His name was Peter, and he was Reggie's loyal follower. "Of course, just pass me the ball when I tell you," Reggie said, handing the ball to Peter and positioning himself behind him. Unlike Andrew's team, his team was scattered and poorly organized. "Set, hut," Reggie shouted. The moment the ball was in his hands, he started running. He had no intention of passing it. He wanted to show off in front of the girls and everyone else. He dodged 2 boys and smiled confidently. The goal line was getting closer. He had always been the best at sports, his dad constantly reminded him of that. But everything changed when Andrew showed up. Before Reggie could reach the goal, he was tackled by Andrew. "Is this the sky?" Reggie thought in confusion. He hadn't even noticed when Andrew got close enough to bring him down. Seconds later, the pain of his first tackle started to sink in. "Don't cry," Andrew said, noticing Reggie's eyes beginning to glisten. He knew he had just tackled a 6-year-old, he was 1 too. He had adjusted his strength accordingly. "You did great dodging Archie and Kevin. I almost couldn't catch you," Andrew added with a kind smile, extending his hand to help Reggie up. "Huh, thanks," Reggie said, accepting Andrew's help and wiping his eyes with his other hand. Crying now would be way too embarrassing. Andrew widened his smile and gave a thumbs up. "I know a tackle hurts, but we have to get used to it to become stronger." "Really?" Reggie asked, still in some pain but with growing admiration. "Of course, the more tackles you take, the tougher you'll become. You're the first to take a real tackle, Andrew said. That's right, I was the first, Reggie replied with a proud smile. No one had experienced a real tackle before. They usually played with flags or just tagged the opponent like a game of tag. Reggie, that was awesome. What does it feel like to be tackled? I want to be tackled too. The other kids were buzzing with excitement over Reggie's tackle. They didn't want to miss out and were eager to experience their own first tackle. Relax, your time will come, Andrew thought with a slight smile. This way, everyone would be happy to be tackled, and there'd be no crying to their moms, avoiding any trouble for him. I'm switching teams. Switch me, David, Reggie said. Poor David had no choice but to agree. Andrew wasn't sure why Reggie suddenly switched teams, but he didn't think much of it and restarted the game. I'll protect you, quarterback, Reggie thought, a new enthusiasm shining in his eyes. So, Andrew's the one tackling all the kids? Asked a large man with little hair and a few wrinkles. Yes, Dad, that's him, Mitchell replied with an odd look on his face. Jay watched the boy with jet black hair and green eyes tackling left and right. Then he made very precise passes and every so often ran, dodging everyone with perfection. For some strange reason, no boy cried from being tackled. They even got up with big smiles after Andrew said a few words to them and offered his hand to help them up. Jay didn't know what words Andrew was saying, but they worked. The kids' tears disappeared and were replaced by big, enthusiastic smiles full of energy. Aren't they being too rough? Dee Dee asked disapprovingly. Rough, that's how boys should play. Back in my day, we were more violent, Jay said with a slight smile, watching the game unfold before him. Mitchell was surprised by Jay's smile. Let me go tell him you're here. No, let him play with his friends. When they get tired, they'll come for something to drink and I'll give him my gift, Jay said leisurely. A great gift, everyone thought, seeing a bike wrapped in gift paper. It was obvious from the shape that it was a bicycle. Look, in the end, your dad seems to be accepting Andrew, Cameron commented in a low tone to Mitchell, who only made a slight grimace and said nothing. Almost an hour passed, and all the kids, except Andrew, were sweaty and out of energy. Time to eat, guys, Andrew shouted, and everyone cheered happily as they headed to the tables with food and cold drinks. Andrew, you have to play with us. Andrew, who was sipping a refreshing drink, turned his head and noticed 6 girls his age standing in a row with their arms crossed, looking at him. The one in the middle, and the one who had spoken, was his cousin Haley. Oh no, babysitting again and having tea with the dolls, thought Andrew, making a grimace internally. Luckily, at that moment, Mitchell called him, and he ran toward the adult table without looking back, despite Haley's shouts. What's up, father? Andrew asked with a smile, relieved to have escaped playing with Haley and her friends. I told you to call me Dad, Andrew, Cameron said in a serious tone. Father was too formal for his taste. Oh, that's right, sorry. Father, Andrew said with a slight smile. Cameron raised an eyebrow, and without warning, exclaimed, You little rascal. In one swift movement, he grabbed Andrew and lifted him off the ground effortlessly. With a smile, Cameron began tickling Andrew, who started laughing uncontrollably, trying to break free. No, I can't take it anymore, Andrew said through his laughter, his arms flailing in the air. So you call me Dad, Cameron said, intensifying the tickling. Okay, Dad, I get it, Andrew finally said, and Cameron set him down. That's better, Cameron replied with a smile. Phil, Claire, and the others watched the father-son play with smiles. Mitchell couldn't deny that he felt a little jealous of how naturally Cameron interacted with Andrew. Jay nudged Mitchell's shoulder. He had waited long enough and bought an expensive bike. He didn't want to be forgotten. Oh, that's right, Andrew, come here. This is your grandfather, Jay. Introduce yourself, said Mitchell, introducing Jay, who for the first time made eye contact with Andrew's green eyes. Hello, my name is Andrew Tucker Pritchett. I'm 6 years old. Nice to meet you, Andrew said, introducing himself politely as Mitchell had taught him. Manners make the man. Hello, kid, you have great manners. Here's your gift, Jay said, lifting the bicycle from behind the table and placing it in front of Andrew, who instantly knew what it was. He seems much friendlier than Dee Dee, thought Andrew, a bit surprised by Jay's attitude, although he always had good intentions. He just had trouble expressing them. Andrew opened the gift, and his eyes sparkled with excitement upon seeing the awesome new red and black bicycle. "Cool," exclaimed Andrew with a smile. Jay smiled slightly when he saw that the gift pleased his new grandson. Andrew's friends began to crowd around him, gazing at the bike with envious eyes. "Try it, Andrew," shouted Archie. "Let me try it next." "Why the face, kid?" Jay asked when he noticed the strange expression on Andrew's face. "The training wheels are too much," Andrew replied, noticing the small wheels supporting the bike. "It's your first time riding a bike. It will be dangerous if you do it without support," Mitchell said, disagreeing with his son's risky idea. "Oh, come on, they're just training wheels. I learned to ride a bike with trial and error. We didn't have those wheels in my time," Jay said, supporting Andrew. "The wheels came with the bike. He wouldn't have bought them himself." "No, it's dangerous," Mitchell said firmly, standing his ground. "Please, Dad," Andrew said, clasping his hands together. Mitchell hesitated at Andrew's tender green eyes. "Considering your skill in all sports, I think you'll be fine," Mitchell said, giving in. "Thanks," Andrew said with a smile. "Look how low you'll go just to get me to call you Dad," Cameron murmured near Mitchell, who said nothing. Jay went to get a screwdriver and removed the training wheels. Andrew climbed onto the bike. It would be a good accessory to train his quadriceps and most of his legs. He would gain a lot more power. Bodyweight squats were already becoming insufficient, he had to do many repetitions, and it was impossible to get weights due to his young age. No one would give him dumbbells or a barbell with discs. Andrew had to act as if it was his first time riding a bike, so he needed help from an adult. It would be strange if he rode perfectly on his first try. More than talented, it would be odd. Besides, he was an expert at riding bikes. In his past life, his bike was indispensable for his day-to-day life. He was helped by Jay. It felt strange that the man wanted to help him, but he accepted. After all, he gave him the bike. Okay, that's it. You've got it," Jay said with a smile, letting go of Andrew. By his fifth attempt, he managed to balance and ride without falling. "My turn now?" Archie asked. "Mine. Let me try, Andrew." "I'll do it on my third try," Reggie said, his competitive spirit ignited. "You'll have to tackle me if you want to use the bike. Catch me if you can," Andrew yelled, turning his head to look at his friends, who immediately began chasing him. "Is this safe?" Mitchell asked, watching all the kids run after Andrew like moths chasing the light. "I doubt it," Cameron replied with a sigh. 20 minutes later, Reggie, Archie, and all the other kids were lying on the grass, exhausted. They couldn't tackle Andrew. Even though he had to circle around, they couldn't catch him because he dodged them flawlessly. "That was a good workout," Andrew commented, stopping and getting off the bike. "Teach me how to ride a bike," Haley asked, coming up to him and standing in front of him. With no other option, Andrew tried to help Haley ride the bike with Phil's assistance. His birthday ended. It had been a good birthday. He got a very useful bike for his training. He met Jay, and their relationship improved quite a bit for just the first meeting. After his friends left, he played passes with Jay, who was surprised by Andrew's precise throws. Even though he had seen them, it was different receiving them. Andrew was out of energy. He had worked hard today, training before his birthday, playing football with his friends, and later with Jay. Riding the bike and then teaching Haley. He said goodbye to everyone and went to his room, exhausted. In the living room, only Mitchell, Cameron, and Jay remained. Phil, Claire, and the kids had left, and Grandma Dee had gone a while ago. Cameron was washing the plates and glasses. Mitchell went to open the door for his father. "Thanks for coming today. Your gift made Andrew very happy," Mitchell thanked him. Although it took you a year to meet him, Mitchell thought, but didn't say anything. "It's nothing. Sorry it took me so long to come meet him. You know I'm old-fashioned when it comes to adopted kids. You never know if they could be a serial killer," Jay began, then quickly backtracked when he saw Mitchell's expression. "I'm not talking about Andrew. He's an excellent kid. His friends see him as a leader. Plus, he's a genius at football. I'm surprised he's your son," Jay said, realizing he had put his foot in his mouth again. "I'm not referring to Dad." "Enough. I get your point," Mitchell interrupted. "It's good that Jay liked Andrew. He might have a good grandfather if their relationship keeps improving. All right, since we lost time as grandfather and grandson, I was thinking of going to see a San Francisco 49ers game. They'll play a friendly match next Friday. Ask Andrew if he wants to go." Only if he wants to, it's not a commitment, Jay suggested, somewhat hesitantly. Oh, that's great, he's a fan of the San Francisco 49ers. I'm surprised. Mitchell stopped, surprised by his father's willingness. I mean, it's no big deal. Just a game, but, well, if he likes football, we could have a good time, Jay added, downplaying it. Mitchell smiled slightly, realizing his father's efforts to form a good relationship with Andrew. I'll tell him, I'm sure he'll be thrilled. Fine, fine, Jay said, shaking his head as if minimizing the gesture. He said goodbye, and Mitchell went back into the house. 19 comments 0 vote, time skip I. 5 years later, Dunphy House. Phil, put pants on Luke right now. Claire yelled exasperatedly as she cooked a large batch of sandwiches. Little Luke, 5 years old, was walking around the living room in his underwear while eating chocolate ice cream with his hands and chasing a fly that wouldn't let itself be caught. Luke tripped over his own feet and fell to the floor, spilling all the ice cream on his white shirt and face. Claire, who saw this, exploded. Damn it, she yelled, throwing the mayonnaise against the countertop and rushing toward Luke, who, instead of crying, was laughing for some reason. It was as if he liked the mess. Phil's comment, today's the big day for Andy. The big final. Eagles versus Moose. Go Eagles, Phil said with a smile as he stared directly at the camera in front of him. Today was the final between Eastwood Eagles School and Moose Ridge School, both elementary schools. Andrew was part of the Eastwood Eagles. Haley also went to that school. Phil was wearing a blue and white t-shirt with the team logo and the number 1 on the back, the same number Andrew wore, as he was the quarterback of the team. He paired this with white shorts and sneakers. He also wore a cap with the Eagles logo and knee-high socks with blue and white stripes that clung to his hairy legs. From little Andy's first birthday, I knew he had the makings of a quarterback. This is his 5th championship win. Wait, is it the 5th or 6th? Phil wondered, looking confused. He had already forgotten how many times Andrew had won championships in elementary school. As he tried to remember all the times Andrew had been champion, he heard a shout from downstairs. Phil, put pants on Luke right now. 1st grade, champion, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th too. Haley is already 10, so he's in 5th grade just like her. This will be the 5th consecutive championship if they win, Phil said with a smile. Damn it, an even louder scream than the previous one reached Phil's ears, and he looked nervous. He quickly got up and left the room. End of comment. I'm coming down, Phil said hurriedly as he ran down the stairs. One of the steps gave way, and he almost tripped. I need to fix that step, Phil muttered as he reached the dining room and saw Claire picking up Luke and removing his shirt covered in ice cream. Claire looked at Phil with a piercing gaze. Leave Luke to me. Come on, buddy, we need to change and put pants on, Phil said as he lifted Luke. Are you going to wear that? Claire asked, looking at Phil's outfit, which in her opinion was pathetic. Yes, why do you ask the same thing every year? Phil asked. Nothing. Go change Luke. We don't have time. Also tell Haley to hurry, she should still be in her room getting ready. Claire said with a strange expression, then returned to the kitchen. Claire and Phil's comment, I'm worried about Haley, Claire began. Lately, it seems like she can't let go of Andrew. It's like she's stuck to him all the time, Claire said with a worried look. Phil, not catching where Claire was going, said enthusiastically, of course. He's the guy on the team. Andy has that effect on people. He's like an adorable sports hero with those little green eyes. Claire sighed, putting her hand to her face. But, what if she gets too close to him? Claire said, trying to make Phil understand. What's the problem? They'll be super cousins, Phil said with a smile, looking at the camera. Claire elbowed him, and they both exchanged glances. Finally, Phil understood the look Claire was giving him. Oh, no, that won't happen, Claire. Absolutely not. Besides, I saw Andy's look, he's obsessed with football. Don't worry, Phil said, shaking his hand repeatedly. Let's hope so, Claire said. End of comment. Pritchett Tucker House. Absolutely not, Cam, Mitchell said, intercepting Cam as he tried to go to his room. Why not? Cam asked, trying to find a gap to squeeze through the door, but it was impossible given his size. Andrew hates clowns. You are not going to dress up as FSBO, Mitchell exclaimed, finally letting the comment out, saying it made him feel like a huge burden had been lifted from him, like something magical and refreshing. Don't lie, Andrew loves FSBO. He never complained at any of the parties or birthdays he attended with FSBO, Cam said indignantly. He wouldn't allow anyone to insult FSBO. When Cam was a teenager, he developed an interest in clowns after discovering they were just people with makeup. He later trained with Professor Ringmaster Al Uzieli and created his own clown character, which he named FSBO. According to Cam, FSBO is an innocent clown whose only drive is to bring joy and laughter to people. He didn't complain because he's the kindest boy I've ever met. Didn't you notice his face? He never smiles when you're dressed as FSBO and looks at you with a bit of distrust, Mitchell said. What? Impossible. Everyone loves FSBO, Cameron said, his mouth open in shock, as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water over him. Look at this and you'll see the truth, Mitchell said, walking toward the living room. From one of the shelves, he took a photo album that said, Andrew's Childhood Memories. The album was pink and covered in cute stickers. Each white page was adorned with roses and bright colors. Then there was a photo where Andrew always appeared with his friends, his parents, his family, etc. Look, April 2003, Andrew won his third championship. He was named MVP and received several other individual awards. Look at his face, really look at it, Mitchell said, lightly tapping the photo several times. Cam looked at the photo where Andrew was wearing his school football uniform. He had several gold medals hanging around his neck and 2 trophies in his hands. What was strange was that he didn't have the usual smiling, enthusiastic expression. Andrew was looking sideways with some distrust at a large man standing beside him, smiling at the camera and holding Andrew by the shoulder. It was Cam, dressed as FSBO. Mitchell didn't stop there. He showed Cam all the photos where Andrew posed with FSBO, birthdays, competitions won, parties, etc. Oh my God, it's true. He doesn't like FSBO at all. What have I done? Memories that should have been happy ended up like this for little Andy. Cam said, putting his hands on his head. Why didn't he ever tell me? You should have told me. Cam said, feeling guilty and quickly blaming Mitchell. Don't blame me so fast, Mitchell said with a grimace. I was going to tell you, but Andrew convinced me not to. He knows you love FSBO and didn't want to hurt your feelings, he added. Oh, that little angel, Cam said, tears in his eyes. Mitchell sighed inwardly. You can't get sentimental now, Cam. Time is of the essence. We need to go get the shirts. It's a tradition that every year Andrew wins a championship, he gets a shirt that says so, Mitchell said seriously. His son was a genius in football, and he knew he would win. The victory was 100% guaranteed. So, every year, Mitchell ordered shirts to rub it in the other parents' faces that his son was a genius and better than theirs. That's his style. That's true. Let's go, Cam said, wiping away his tears. They quickly got ready, grabbed the car keys, and left the house. Comment from Mitchell and Cameron. On our son's big day, they'll wonder, why are the parents of the child leaving the house without the child? Cameron said in an indignant tone, glancing sideways at Mitchell. Well, he can answer them, Cameron finally said, looking at Mitchell after a few seconds of uncomfortable silence. Why does it bother you so much that my dad is taking him to the game? We'll see him there anyway. In previous years, he was always with us. We shouldn't be selfish. I never thought I'd see my dad so happy, Mitchell said, sighing. It's not about that. Parents should be the ones to take their kid to the big game. Plus, it was the same last year. This time, Jay showed up unannounced and took Andrew to his house, telling him he got a DVD of the 1969 Super Bowl game. It was impossible for Andrew not to want to go knowing that, and it was impossible for me to say no when he was so excited to watch that game. It was playing dirty, Jay, Cameron explained, detailing the reason for his frustration. Well, that's true. That's playing dirty, Dad, Mitchell said, unable to argue. It was so easy to convince Andrew with football-related items, especially historical games. Anyway, it's great how well Jay and Andrew get along. Since Andrew's 6th birthday, their grandfather-grandson relationship has been smooth sailing, Mitchell said with a happy smile. In fact, because of this, his relationship with his father had improved since he saw him much more than before. 26 comments 0 vote. Time skip to Jay's house. Andrew woke up earlier that day. Today was the final. His school, the Eagles, versus the Moose Ridge School. Andrew wasn't very excited, mostly because of the level of competition. There wasn't much he could do. He was facing kids aged 10 or 11. In his previous school life, Andrew had been a prodigy, the best quarterback in high school. He had died at the age of 16, almost 17, during his junior year, 11th grade. He was just one grade away from finishing high school. He had achieved the highest championship possible for his age, leading his team as its captain and star player. His skill level had been elite for someone his age and even surpassed many older players since he hadn't yet reached his senior year. Now, he had been reborn into a 5-year-old body. His superiority was now double, triple, or even greater than what it had been before. With years of training since his transmigration, his technical ability was already at a college level, or so he believed. He especially looked forward to his teenage years. He still needed to grow to gain more power in his throws and to continue improving his agility and reflexes. In terms of physical strength, he was far superior to other kids his age. He had noticed that this body had better genetics compared to his previous self. He was faster than both his teammates and the rivals he had faced. Although this could also be due to the structured training regimen he followed. No other kid his age had as much discipline. If he kept on this path, he would achieve a better version of himself than ever before. He would reach his prime, both technically and physically. Not only would he be a quarterback capable of throwing precise passes and reading plays with exceptional skill, but he would also be able to run when the situation called for it and score on his own. He would develop more endurance to last through games and withstand tougher tackles. So, the championships he won in elementary school weren't much of an achievement or excitement for Andrew. It's like going through the paperwork. He focused more on being a good leader, helping his teammates maximize their skills and become the stars of the game. A leader and a coach on the field. On the other hand, they weren't even playing real football. They played a version adapted for young kids, flag football. This was played at all grade levels in elementary school. In this format, instead of tackling, players wore flags around their waists, and to tackle, you had to remove the opponent's flags. This eliminated heavy physical contact and significantly reduced the risk of injury. Andrew thought this was garbage, but he didn't complain since the format wasn't going to change just because of him. 1, 2, 3, 4, Andrew was in the backyard of his grandfather Jay's house, doing push-ups to warm up. Afterward, he stretched a little and ran laps around the yard. Jay's house was huge. Having a grandfather with money was great for training comfortably. Over the years, Andrew's relationship with his new family had improved a lot. He never thought having a family again could be so fun. After his grandfather's death, Richard had considered his football teammates his family, but it wasn't the same. He couldn't spend all day with them or share the daily moments like he did with his new parents, Mitchell and Cameron, his grandfather Jay, whom he saw almost 4 or 5 times a week, and his uncles and cousins. Thanks to his new family, Andrew really enjoyed his childhood. At first, he thought he'd be impatient to grow up so he could get back to playing serious, exciting, and challenging football games. But spending time with his family made him much more patient and allowed him to train smartly, preparing for the future. After finishing his initial warm-up, Andrew positioned himself several meters away from a precision passing net, an intricate web of ropes and circular targets of varying sizes, hanging at different heights. A gift from his grandfather, Jay. He took a deep breath and threw the ball toward the highest and smallest target. The ball sailed through the air and passed cleanly through the center ring with a sharp snap. "Well done, kid," said Jay, clapping lightly as he walked toward Andrew. "Grandpa, you're awake. I thought the hangover would take longer to wear off," Andrew replied with a small smile. The night before, while watching the historic 1969 Super Bowl game, Jay had drunk a lot of whiskey and ended up falling asleep on the couch after the game ended. "Don't mock your grandpa, you brat," Jay exclaimed with a grin and a deep chuckle as he ruffled Andrew's black hair, making him laugh. Nervous about the game, Jay asked, finally leaving Andrew's hair alone. "No, it's flag football," Andrew answered with a grimace. "I don't understand how they're still playing that format. They're 10 years old, damn," Jay said with disapproval, forgetting it was still elementary school. "Yeah, damn," Andrew replied with a smile, throwing another ball that sailed through the side hoop. He now had more footballs, which made his practices much more efficient. A gift from his family, who had all pitched in to buy him plenty of balls. "Don't tell your parents I taught you how to curse," Jay said with a faint smile. "I will. I'll also tell them I tried whiskey yesterday," Andrew replied, smiling mischievously. "You little devil, get over here," Jay exclaimed, starting to chase Andrew, who immediately began running away from him. "Catch me if you can, old man." If you do, I won't tell my parents anything, Andrew shouted, turning his head back and flashing Jay a wide smile. After playing around for a bit, Jay and Andrew sat down for breakfast. They had woken up late, and the game wasn't until 4 p.m. They had plenty of time. Finally, it was time to leave. 15 minutes before the game, Andrew and Jay headed out of the house. Andrew carried a bag slung over his shoulder with his gear. He preferred keeping his equipment at home rather than leaving it at school. All set, said Jay as he closed the bed of his trusty silver Chevrolet Silverado. The truck was sturdy, spacious, and commanding, just the way Jay liked it. That's how a man's truck should be. Can I ride in the front? Andrew asked. Being only 10 years old, he wasn't usually allowed to sit in the front like an adult. Jay hesitated for a moment. He really should say no, that's what a responsible grandpa would do. But seeing Andrew's hopeful expression, he couldn't bring himself to deny him. All right, but put your seatbelt on, Jay said. You got it, Andrew replied with a grin, hopping into the front passenger seat. Jay climbed in and started the truck. Everything was going smoothly until, halfway there, a loud noise and a jolt disrupted the peaceful ride. What happened? Andrew asked, his eyes snapping open. Drool dripped from the corner of his mouth. He'd fallen asleep. Napping was one of his favorite pastimes. After all, it was the best way for his muscles to grow and recover. I think we've got a flat, Jay replied, frowning. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road and got out to inspect. Great, 2 flat tires, he added with a mix of frustration and resignation. Andrew climbed out, still looking sleepy, and noticed 2 nails stuck in the tires. Who's the idiot that left those on the road? He thought. What are we going to do? Andrew asked, yawning. You don't seem too concerned, Jay said, glancing up at his grandson, who looked like he might fall asleep standing up. Andrew just gave a slight smile. He wasn't particularly excited about the game. It was like completing a game 100% on the hardest difficulty and then replaying it on the easiest setting. There was no sense of accomplishment in beating those monsters or bosses. This will be good training for the boys, Andrew thought, rubbing his chin. By the boys, he meant Archie, Reggie, Kevin, and the rest of the team. Without him there, they'd have to step up, carry the team, and prove what they were made of. I don't have 2 spare tires. We won't get a taxi in time. The damn cabs take a long time to pass, Jay said, trying to figure out how they could make it. While Jay was still thinking with no clear solution in mind, he noticed Andrew doing some basic stretches. Don't tell me he's going to. Jay thought, frowning slightly. You're not planning to run all the way to the field, are you? We're still 5 kilometers away, Jay commented. Do you have a better idea? It's Sunday. Buses will take forever, and taxis rarely pass by. Running is the best option, Andrew replied. An intermediate runner would take about 30 minutes to cover 5 kilometers. That would be a tough task for a 10-year-old, but not for Andrew. He'd be about 10 minutes late, but that was better than waiting for a bus that might never come. Jay sighed internally. Everyone in the family knew how obsessed the kid was with training and football, a level of dedication rarely seen in 10-year-olds. It was usually amusing, like the time Andrew was doing push-ups in a hospital, but other times, it was a bit over the top. Jay looked up at the sky. The blazing sun made him squint and raise a hand to shield his eyes. Not a cloud in sight. It was 3:40 in the afternoon, the temperature was over 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and there wasn't the slightest breeze. All right, you've got this, kid. See you at the game, Jay said, knowing his grandson was as stubborn as Mitchell and Claire. As for him, he'd wait in the truck with the air conditioning on and call a taxi. The game would last 45 minutes. Professional games are 60 minutes long, but since these were elementary school kids, the time was shortened. With luck, Andrew would make it in time to play the last few minutes of the game. Jay wasn't too worried about missing most of it. He had always wanted Mitchell to excel in sports, so when he discovered Andrew's talent for football, he was overjoyed, even if he didn't show it openly. However, he had already seen Andrew win 4 championships, and this time would likely be the same, so his excitement had waned a bit. The truly thrilling games would be in middle school and high school. Jay looked forward to those and wouldn't miss them for anything when Andrew got older. After finishing his stretches and warm-ups, Andrew grabbed his bag and got ready to run. See you later, old man. By the time I get back, I might already have the trophy at home, Andrew said with a smile before taking off at full speed. Rude brat, Jay thought with a slight smile. 11 comments 0 vote. Time skip 3. Touchdown. The scoreboard lit up again in favor of Moose Ridge School. The Eagles were trailing, 14-32. 3 touchdowns behind. Damn it, shouted Reggie, pulling off his helmet and throwing it onto the grass in frustration. Don't swear, Reggie, the ref might hear you and get you in trouble, said Kevin, walking over and removing his own helmet. Kevin, like Reggie, was one of the close friends Andrew had made in his new life. They all shared a passion for football. My father swears all the time. We only have one half left. Where the hell is Andrew? Reggie said, glancing at the stands. He spotted his father, who was frowning deeply. I don't know, but if you keep throwing those bad passes, I'm sure we're going to lose, said Archie, a red-haired boy approaching the group. Reggie clicked his tongue but didn't reply. He had thought being quarterback would be easy, but he was very wrong. He much preferred when Andrew passed him the ball so he could run and dodge everyone. Giving orders, leading the team, and making perfect passes wasn't his thing. What's wrong, girls? Having a lover's quarrel? Asked a boy wearing a different uniform, smirking as he walked up to them. Nick, Reggie muttered, scowling. Nick was the captain and quarterback of the other team, cocky, arrogant, full of himself, and backed by parents with a lot of money. Where's Andrew? Did he chicken out now that he can actually get tackled? Nick asked with a smug grin. You, growled Reggie, but just then, he was called over by his coach and pulled away by Archie and Kevin. We've got 5 minutes, murmured Coach Josh. He was a middle-aged man with a goatee, short brown hair, and square glasses. Josh never expected the team to be beaten this badly without Andrew. It made him feel like he wasn't doing his job properly. Reggie, Kevin, and the others were great players too, better than average. The school had never had a football team this strong in its history. They had won 4 consecutive elementary school championships, defeating even top private schools like Ridge School. Josh scanned the stands and the field entrance, hoping to spot a boy slightly taller than average, with jet black hair and a passionate gaze that could ignite excitement in everyone watching. Coach, Kevin asked, pulling Josh back to reality. He looked at all the boys staring at him, and for the first time, he saw defeated and helpless expressions on their faces. They've got the kickoff, so it'll be our turn to attack after that. We've got 15 minutes to turn this game around. Reggie, you're going back to running back. Steve, you'll be quarterback, Josh said, giving rapid instructions. Me? Steve asked, a scrawny boy of average height. His usual position was wide receiver, but he hadn't caught a single pass so far, mainly because no one had thrown him a decent one. There was no substitute for Andrew. Yes, it's pointless if Andrew isn't here to throw the ball. We'll focus on short passes between Reggie and Archie. Everything will depend on our running backs, Josh explained. He trusted the 2 boys, they were fast and strong. First, Josh continued, laying out his strategy. ... Where's Andrew? Cameron shouted, looking frantically in every direction. They had arrived late to the game because of the stupid jerseys Mitchell had ordered, and even now, there was no sign of their son. His team was losing for the first time. He should be here any minute, Mitchell mumbled, sweat dripping from his forehead, and not because of the heat. He was wearing a shirt that read Pentacamp ones. In previous years, Mitchell had only revealed the shirts after Andrew's team had won the game, but this year, he'd decided to be bold and showed up wearing them. The whole family was in the matching shirts, even Luke and Alex. He could feel the mocking stares coming from the Ridge School stands, where the parents and relatives of the opposing team sat. Did you bring the jackets? Mitchell asked discreetly. No, Mitchell, everyone's already seen me in these shirts. If I have to go through the embarrassment, you will too, Claire replied in an irrefutable tone. She could already feel the mocking stares of the snobby parents, and she didn't like it one bit. Especially not when her nephew's team was about to lose. It felt like her loss too. She wasn't ready to lose after 4 years of winning. Mitchell frowned and glanced sideways at the opposing stands, where the enthusiastic air was a stark contrast to the previous years. Finally, they would become champions. Celebrate this year at least, Mitchell said with disdain. Andrew had already won 4 years, it was time to share a little and let the others experience what it's like to win. This year is the most important. Finally, they're playing real football. They can tackle now and left those flags behind, said a father from the opposing team. The stands weren't far away, and he overheard Mitchell's comment. Plus, he saw the flags from the whole family, and it irritated him. This year was for his son, not these public school kids. Thorpe, Phil murmured, glaring at the man. He knew him well. They both worked in real estate. Thorpe was his nemesis and sold much more than he did, which allowed him to send his son to a private, prestigious school. Phil had 3 children, and it was very expensive to send them all to private schools. Adding to his professional rivalry with Thorpe, Phil took great pleasure in seeing Andrew crush his son's team and watching Thorpe's frustrated expression. Especially because Thorpe was a show-off and arrogant. He always mocked the teams his son's school defeated. "Go, Nick, crush them," Thorpe shouted with a big smile. Nick turned and smiled back at his father with confidence. However, Nick's smile disappeared, and he looked away. Thorpe found this odd and followed his son's gaze. Thorpe's smile also vanished when he saw what his son was looking at. In the distance, a person was jogging at a moderate pace under the intense sunlight. It was a boy who seemed to be around the same age as Reggie, Nick, and the others. He wasn't wearing a shirt. His torso was defined, and his abs were visible. Odd for a 10-year-old boy. He had the shirt on his head to shield himself from the sun's rays, almost like a cap. In addition to that, he carried a large bag. He wore black shorts that revealed his marked and sweaty legs and calves. It was clearly Andrew. "Damn, I'm too late," Andrew thought, stopping near the field, breathing heavily. When he saw the scoreboard, he noticed there was only one more quarter left, and his team was at a disadvantage. He was late because he helped an elderly woman carry her grocery bags to her house. It was a detour, and it took more time than he expected. He couldn't ignore an elderly woman in need. When he took the shirt off his head, he heard a scream from the stands, several meters away. He quickly recognized the high-pitched shout. It was his father Cameron. He was always so dramatic. Grandpa didn't make it either, Andrew thought as he jogged toward the stands filled with parents and family. For some reason, he was greeted with applause from the entire section of the stands belonging to his school, parents, relatives, teachers, etc. "Andy, you finally made it," exclaimed Phil, Cameron, Mitchell, Haley, and Luke as they rushed toward Andrew. "Now everyone calls me Andy," Andrew thought with a confused expression on his face. "Go with the team. There's little time left for rest. You need to change, fast," said Mitchell with both enthusiasm and nervousness. The others nodded in agreement and sent Andrew to the coach and the rest of the team members, who cheered with joy upon seeing him. "Crush them, we believe in you," shouted Claire, clenching her fist. She wouldn't lose to these damn rich parents. Andrew still had a confused look on his face. Why had no one asked him anything? Why was he late? Where was Jay? Why had he run? Didn't anyone care that he ran under the sun with temperatures over 86 degrees Fahrenheit? He had run more than 5 kilometers. No one offered him a towel to dry off the sweat or a cold bottle of water. In just a few minutes, he was already dressed in his uniform, so he focused on the game. He would have a talk with his family later. "Where are the flags?" Andrew asked, adjusting his uniform. "Flags? This year they decided that the final would be played without flags. That's why everyone's so excited," Reggie replied, raising an eyebrow as he looked at Andrew. "Yeah, real tackles. So the final would be more exciting." Both schools agreed. "Your parents should have signed some paper or something," Archie commented with a smile. The confidence of all the team members returned when they saw Andrew in front of them. Josh looked at everyone with a smile, pleased to see that they had regained their enthusiasm and hope. "What really?" Andrew exclaimed, incredulous. He had never heard of this, or maybe he had, but since it was elementary school football, he hadn't paid attention. He had missed a real game. At least he would play the last quarter, which was 15 minutes long. "You didn't know?" asked Steve, who was eating a cake Claire had made. He had managed to sneak one from the table. "Damn it," murmured Andrew, "let's go. It's time," he added, walking towards the field. 29 comments 0 vote. Time skip IV. Andrew gathered the team in a huddle to communicate the play. This is where the quarterback gives specific instructions about the play to be executed. "We've got 15 minutes, and we need 3 touchdowns, Andrew said. "Looks like you guys need more training," he added with a faint smile that sent shivers down everyone's spine. They knew just how intense their captain was about training. None of them wanted to increase their hours of suffering. "Hey, it's not our fault. We don't have a backup quarterback," Steve said, crumbs still on his mouth from the cupcake he'd just eaten. "Excuses are for losers. We'll discuss extra training later. For now, when those damned from Moose School kick the ball, we're going to catch it and score a touchdown," Andrew exclaimed, leaving everyone stunned. "A touchdown on the kickoff," everyone repeated. The kickoff marks the start of the game. The kicking team places the ball on a tee at their own 35-yard line, and one player kicks the ball as hard as they can towards the opposing field. The receiving team, in this case, Andrew's team, must catch the ball and try to return it as far as possible. Scoring a touchdown on a kickoff, known as a kickoff return touchdown, is uncommon and considered an impressive feat. The main challenge is that the receiving team has to cover a long distance, usually 75 yards or more, while dodging all the opposing players trying to stop them. "Are we seriously going to do this?" Steve asked with a puzzled look as he lined up on the field with the rest of the team. The plan was simple. Andrew would be the returner and run the ball. The others had to protect him. Although Andrew was the quarterback and, under normal circumstances, this task would fall to the running backs Archie and Reggie, Andrew was faster than both of them. "Yes, now let's crush them," Andrew said, breaking up the huddle and giving orders for everyone to take their positions. Tom, the kicker from Moose Ridge School, prepared for the kickoff. With a powerful strike, he sent the ball soaring into the Eagles' field. The ball landed at the 10-yard line. Andrew quickly caught it and began to run, followed closely by his teammates acting as bodyguards. With a combination of speed and agility, Andrew left behind the Moose Ridge players who tried to catch him. Little by little, he began to outpace his own teammates, who couldn't keep up. Running solo was better anyway. Archie and Reggie managed to keep up just enough to tackle two players, saving Andrew from trouble. Thanks to this, Andrew saw an opening in the defense and accelerated, his legs moving at full speed. The last defenders desperately tried to stop him, but he left them behind with an elegant spin move. One of them, Nick, lunged at Andrew but ended up eating dirt, clueless about how his nemesis had dodged him. "Touchdown," shouted the referee in a tone that betrayed his surprise, raising both arms. The Eastwood Eagles had scored on the kickoff return, adding 6 points to the scoreboard. "Just 2 more touchdowns. We have time," Andrew thought as he stood in the end zone. He turned around and saw the stands in silence, his own included. Until a high-pitched scream echoed across the field. It was Cam, shouting his name. Phil and the others quickly joined in the celebration. The stands erupted in applause. It was rare to see a touchdown from the opening kickoff. On top of that, few knew that Andrew was also a fast and agile runner since he usually focused on passing and leading the team. A real talent. The game is already won, Josh thought with a faint smile. It had been a long time since he'd seen a kickoff return touchdown. Andrew showed no mercy. Losses were rare for him. In this life, none. And it didn't weigh on his conscience, he had always been fiercely competitive. He played the entire 15 minutes both on offense and defense. He finally got the chance to tackle properly. At Reggie's request, and that of the rest of the team, Andrew took it upon himself to tackle Nick. He didn't like that arrogant, cocky kid either. "Game over, Eagles 44 Moose 32, the referee announced. Reggie, Archie, Steve, and the rest of the team roared with joy, celebrating their championship victory once again. The Eagles' stands exploded with cheers and applause. Andrew smiled faintly, seeing his teammates' happiness. Victory felt good. He glanced at the losing team, their faces long with disappointment, and shook his head. "That's football," Andrew thought. "Some win, others lose. There's nothing you can do about it." The awards ceremony continued. First, they handed out medals to both teams, followed by the individual awards: MVP, Most Valuable Player, Best Offensive Player, and Best Defensive Player. Andrew won all 3 awards since he played both offense and defense. In competitive teams, there is usually a separate team for offense, which includes the quarterback, and another for defense. However, as a 10-year-old, Andrew could play on both sides. In the future, though, he wouldn't be playing defense anymore. He earned the MVP and Best Offensive Player awards because he was instrumental in his team's victory in every game, scoring multiple touchdowns and demonstrating impressive accuracy in his passes. After the awards were handed out, it was time to present the trophy and celebrate with the entire team. Finally, water, Andrew thought as the celebrations calmed down and he could grab a drink and enjoy the sandwiches and cupcakes Claire had prepared. After celebrating with his teammates, it was time for family photos. They did it every year. What Andrew liked the least was taking pictures with Cam dressed as a clown, but he noticed FSBO hadn't shown up this time. "Dad won't make it for the photos," Mitchell commented. Andrew had already explained that they had a flat tire and Jay had stayed behind waiting for a taxi. No one was surprised that Andrew had run all the way here, they were slowly getting used to it. "Father, FSBO didn't come today?" Andrew asked casually. To avoid confusion, Andrew had decided to call Mitch, father, and Cam, dad. Mitch wanted to be called dad, but he lost at rock paper scissors to Cam, so he couldn't complain. "No, I told him you don't like FSBO, neither do I," Mitchell said in a low voice. "Thank God," Andrew whispered in relief. He wouldn't have to deal with that creepy clown anymore, who was, in reality, his dad. In his past life, he had watched it and developed a fear of clowns. Did he take it well? Andrew asked. He knew Cam could be dramatic and overly sensitive, capable of turning something that Andrew and Mitchell would consider trivial into a major ordeal. "At first, no, but then I showed him the photos of you with FSBO, and he realized on his own that you didn't like the clown at all. We're officially free of FSBO for all future parties," Mitchell said, whispering with a slight smile. "Finally, we should have done this ages ago." "Well done, father," Andrew replied, also with a small smile and giving him a thumbs up. FSBO could stay in hell as far as he was concerned. He had endured birthdays, Christmases, and more with that darn clown. It wasn't personal against Cam, he just hated clowns. "What are you two whispering about? We need to take a group photo," Cam said, walking over. "Nothing, let's get the photo," Mitch and Andrew said in unison. Right at that moment, Jay arrived, sipping a cold smoothie. As he had expected, Andrew's team won, and his grandson took home all the individual awards. After the final, summer vacation began, and soon after that, Andrew started 6th grade at the middle school. Time flew by, 3 years passed, and in just a few days, Andrew would begin a new chapter in his current life, high school. 41 comments 0 vote. Strange personality. Friday, August 29, 2008. "Andrew, pause the game. We need to talk before we leave," said Cameron, walking into Andrew's room with Mitchell. The walls of the room were painted in matte black, absorbing the light and creating an atmosphere reminiscent of a cave. On one wall, a collection of posters featuring his favorite Marvel and DC heroes was displayed, Spider-Man swinging between skyscrapers and Batman serving justice as he punched a criminal missing a couple of teeth. Next to it, a shelf was packed with Star Wars action figures and memorabilia, including 2 lightsabers and spaceship models. Another wall featured football jerseys from his favorite teams and professional football helmets. On the floor, a rug shaped like a football field stretched out. Opposite his bed stood a 32-inch TV, with an Xbox 360 running beneath it. In a corner near the window was a desk with a PC, monitor, keyboard, mouse, and headphones, all state-of-the-art. The perks of being an only child, his parents rarely said no to the gifts Andrew requested. Andrew was sitting at the corner of his bed, joystick in hand and headphones over his ears, playing Call of Duty, Modern Warfare. "Die, you bastards," Andrew muttered as he fired away indiscriminately. He hadn't heard Cameron due to the headphones and the constant noise of gunfire, explosions, and soldiers shouting. "Aren't those games a bit too violent?" Mitchell whispered to Cameron, who shrugged. "Andrew," Cameron called again, stepping closer to his son. "Oh, Dad, what is it?" Andrew asked, noticing Cameron out of the corner of his eye. He took off his headphones but kept playing, his gaze fixed on the screen. "Pause it, please," Cameron repeated. "I can't, it's online," Andrew replied, his fingers rapidly pressing buttons. Is this his rebellious phase? Mitchell wondered, frowning slightly as he stepped forward. Without hesitation, he pressed a button on the Xbox, and the console powered off. "Hey, why did you do that?" Andrew shouted, jumping up from his seat as the war-torn landscapes disappeared, replaced by a black screen. "You need to listen when we're talking to you," Mitchell said firmly, though he felt a twinge of guilt at the disappointed look on Andrew's face. "I'm surprised you even know which button to press on the Xbox," Andrew said with a sigh, sitting back on his bed. "Do you think I'm some kind of caveman?" "I'm not Cam," Mitchell replied with a small smile, and Andrew laughed, remembering the time Cam had tried to turn off his Xbox but couldn't figure out which button to press. The Xbox had a large, round, shiny silver button. It wasn't exactly hard to spot. "That only happened once. Who would think that flat silver thing was a button?" Cameron said with a frown. "Back to the topic. We're leaving early tomorrow morning. I expect you to be responsible and not throw any parties or anything." We'll be back Sunday if there are no delays, Cameron added. Yeah, I know, no parties. I'll stay here, training, playing video games, and watching a game or two, Andrew replied, playing with a football, passing it from hand to hand. Cameron and Mitchell exchanged a look, concern evident on their faces. Andrew didn't notice, his eyes fixed on the football as he thought about his next phase as a football player, high school. Commentary from Mitchell and Cameron. Tomorrow, we leave first thing in the morning. Our destination is Vietnam. We're adopting a baby, Cameron said, his voice full of excitement, squeezing Mitchell's hand tightly. Mitchell winced slightly in pain. For a long time, they had been considering adopting a baby. Raising Andrew had been a perfect and easy experience for both of them, and they felt ready for the challenge of raising a baby from scratch. They also couldn't deny how much they wanted the experience of raising a child from the very beginning. Easy, Mitchell said, managing to free his hand from Cam's grip. Andy will be alone for the first time. We're not worried, he's very responsible, and it's just 2 days and 1 night, he added. Too responsible, Cameron repeated, exchanging a knowing look with Mitchell before turning back to the camera after a moment. Andrew is unusual by the standards of kids his age. Instead of causing typical trouble like sneaking out to meet friends or a girlfriend, after finishing his football training, he just locks himself in his room, Mitchell said, his expression slightly baffled. He didn't know whether to feel good or bad about it. On one hand, his son didn't bring the typical problems of a teenager. On the other hand, what irked him, so to speak, was that his son was the most popular kid in middle school, being both the captain of the football team and a leader to all his peers. Cam felt the same way. It was odd that the most popular kid would spend his weekends locked up throughout his entire middle school years. Andrew only went out for 2 things: football practice and family visits, his aunt and uncle, Claire and Phil, and his grandfather Jay. Once he had fulfilled his commitments to training and family, Andrew preferred to spend his time in his cave, surrounded by video games and comic books. Haley is very different from him, Cam commented after a few moments. His niece was the textbook definition of popular, irresponsible, rebellious, and carefree. Yeah, even though Andrew has lots of friends, he only sees them at school and football practice, Mitchell said, scratching his beard. Archie, Reggie, Kevin, and Steve were his main friends, but he rarely saw them after school or football practice ended. His 2 great obsessions are football and everything related to comics, video games, sci-fi movies, and pop culture in general. A strange combination, Cameron said. Which is why this is the perfect opportunity for you, Andy. Throw a party. You've got the house to yourself. Something low-key with your classmates, Mitchell said, interlocking his fingers as if this had been his plan all along. Have some fun, in moderation. Maybe you'll even meet a girl. We'd be very happy to meet her, Cameron added. That's true, Andy has never had a girlfriend so far. That's also weird. What popular kid, especially the starting quarterback, doesn't have a cheerleader or someone like that as a girlfriend? Mitchell asked. He had always wanted to be popular during his school years and couldn't stand seeing his son waste all the power he had at his fingertips. Maybe he's gay, Cameron suggested, looking at Mitchell, who also turned to look at him. The room fell silent for a moment before both burst out laughing. Impossible, Mitchell said as he recovered from the laughter. We know how to spot someone in the closet, especially after living with him for 10 years. Yeah, obviously, it wouldn't matter to us whether he's straight or gay, but I'm pretty sure it's the former. I've seen the way he looks at that Star Wars actress. What's her name? Cameron said, looking thoughtful. Paddle. Yeah, I think it's Padlisomething, Mitchell nodded. The actress is Natalie Portman, if I'm not mistaken. He made us watch the movie a dozen times, and he always gets nervous when she shows up. I think she's about his age or maybe a bit older, he added with a slight smile. End of commentary. You can invite your friends and a few classmates. Have a little fun before school ends and high school begins, Mitchell said, looking at Andrew, who was playing with the football. He even slept with that ball, it was the first one they had given him. Huh, didn't you say no parties? Andrew asked, confused, stopping his ball game to look at his parents. Well, we meant no large-scale parties. If it's something small, I'm sure you'll be responsible. As long as the parents pick up their kids early, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson can supervise. They already gave us the go-ahead, Mitchell explained. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson are 2 kind elderly people who live upstairs in the house. The house is divided into 2 floors, each with its number, 212 and 213. They are separated inside, but it was once a single house. Have they set everything up for Mr. and Mrs. Thompson to supervise us? Andrew thought, with a strange expression. Everything seemed to indicate that his parents wanted him to have a mini-party before starting high school. Andrew could see the anticipation on his parents' faces and eventually agreed to the mini-party with his classmates. He could understand a little where their concerns were coming from. Most of the summer he had spent training and locked up in his room playing video games or reading comics. He rarely went out with his friends and didn't have a girlfriend. Great, Cameron said happily. Then they told him it was too late to play video games and that it was time to go to bed. They said their goodbyes and headed toward the door of Andrew's room. "Where's the medal and the MVP trophy?" Cameron asked, stopping by the door and looking at one of the shelves in Andrew's room. Previously, there had been the gold medal and the best player trophy from the district tournament in middle school that Andrew won last year. His last year in middle school. As expected, Andrew won 2 district tournaments in his 3 years of middle school. He was the champion, leading the team in 7th and 8th grade. In 6th grade, he didn't manage to win the championship, as he didn't become a starter until halfway through the season, and it was already too late to make a comeback. Despite his talent and hard work, it's hard to make a spot on the starting team when you're just entering middle school. There's always some resistance. Plus, Andrew didn't care much about winning championships in these district tournaments from 6th to 8th grade. He focused more on his skills and individual training. His rivals still didn't pose a challenge for him. "Oh, I put that in the workshop in a box. I needed space for my Darth Vader figure," Andrew replied with a smile, looking at the imposing figure of the strongest Sith Lord. "You threw it in the workshop to put this figure?" Cam repeated, unable to believe what he was hearing. Though, he wasn't sure why he was so surprised. There wasn't even a trophy or medal Andrew had won in the room. They were all in the dining room, placed there by Mitchell and Cameron, or in the workshop, in dusty boxes. "The important thing is this," Andrew said, holding up a photo in a black frame that was on his nightstand. Andrew showed the photo to his parents. In the photo, Andrew and the rest of the team were smiling, celebrating the title. They were all sweaty and dirty after finishing the game, but their faces were full of happiness. "Andrew," Mitchell and Cameron said, moved by their son's response. Andrew just smiled, which to Mitchell and Cameron looked like the smile of an angel. What really mattered was having fun with your friends and immortalizing those moments. "Anyway, those medals aren't worth much. If I sell them, maybe I can buy a not-so-good figure," Andrew thought as he got into bed, unaware that his parents were looking at him like an angel who only cared about the power of friendship. Mitchell and Cameron left the room, turning off the light and closing the door. Andrew fell asleep in less than 5 minutes. The most important thing is having a perfect sleep routine, to rest well, recover optimally, and have energy the next day. 42 comments 0 vote. Mitchell and Cameron leave, Saturday, August 30, 2008. 7 a.m. The alarm went off, and Andrew opened his eyes. He got up and started changing in front of the mirror, stretching his arms while yawning. He took off the shirt he used as pajamas, exposing his torso and defined abs. "Did I grow a bit, or is it my imagination?" Andrew thought, observing his reflection. His hair was dark and messy, with a couple of strands always falling over his green eyes. He was thinking of cutting his hair before starting school, since it was annoying that the locks of hair blocked your vision, especially when making passes. Andrew stepped closer and then moved back to examine his height in the mirror. Height wasn't something trivial for him. As a quarterback, the taller you are, the better, since it gives you a better view of the field. Curiously, he looked at the mark on the wall of his room, one he used to track his height. Standing next to it, he noticed a small difference. From 1.77 to 1.78, not bad, he murmured, pleased. It was a small change, but enough. He was now among the taller guys in his class. After that, he finished changing. He searched his wardrobe for a black Nike training shirt. Then he grabbed a matching pair of black shorts from the same brand. Finally, he put on his running shoes. Since he had the whole day free during the holidays, the first thing he did every morning was go for a run, according to his training plan. Currently, he was running about 8 kilometers. As a quarterback, he focuses on explosiveness, agility, and endurance, so he doesn't concentrate on running long distances. Instead, he runs 8 kilometers combined with sprints and direction-changing exercises. After changing, he left his room and headed to the kitchen. It wasn't time for breakfast yet. He always runs on an empty stomach first, and then it's time for his first meal. He grabbed 2 glasses of cold water from the fridge and left the house. Mitchell and Cameron were still asleep. Their flight was leaving a little later, so it was likely they wouldn't wake up until 8 a.m. On the sidewalk in front of his house, he started warming up for 10 minutes. After that, he was ready to start. He would run 4 kilometers and then turn around to finish the remaining 4 kilometers at home. Up bright and early as always, young man Andrew, who was doing some simple stretches, looked up and noticed 2 elderly people sitting in chairs on the terrace. They were his upstairs neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. "Hello, Mrs. Bethany and Mr. Jacob." Andrew greeted them with a smile and a wave. Just as enthusiastic as ever, Bethany said, chuckling lightly. Andrew had a great relationship with the elderly couple, even though Jacob was the typical grumpy old man. He helped them with various tasks like shopping, delivering mail, moving furniture, and so on. "Of course, it's a beautiful morning," Andrew said, inhaling the fresh morning air through his nostrils. "You always say the same thing," Jacob said in his gruff voice. "Shouldn't you be sleeping in like any normal kid your age?" he asked, though it sounded more like a complaint. It was unusual for a 15-year-old to wake up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday during vacation. His parents hadn't even woken up yet. "I can't waste the morning." "Well, it's getting late. Bye," Andrew said, turning around and getting ready to run. "Maximum effort," he exclaimed as he began running at full speed, quickly becoming a small dot in the distance. "That kid is crazy," Jacob commented. "Haha, he's just very enthusiastic. He's a football fan," Bethany said with a smile. "You mean a monster," Jacob corrected, recalling last year's games in which Andrew played as the starting quarterback in the middle school district tournament. Middle school teams compete within their school districts. The school Andrew attends is part of the Los Angeles Unified School District (LAUSD), one of the largest and most competitive in the country. Andrew won 2 of those district tournaments as starting quarterback, delivering spectacular performances in every game. He was named MVP in both tournaments. Jacob and Bethany had watched the games. Jacob is a fan of football and is always happy when Andrew kicks butt. This year will be a real challenge for Andrew. If they win the district tournament, they'll be able to compete in the state playoffs. Plus, the district tournaments are much more competitive than in middle school, Jacob said with a serious expression. He was retired, and the thing he most looked forward to this year were Andrew's games. "You seem more excited than he is," Bethany said with a smile. "That's not true," Jacob denied. I'm going to have a little sister," Andrew thought as he ran. A few weeks ago, it marked 10 years since he died and transmigrated into Andrew's body. He was adopted by Mitchell and Cameron, characters from a TV show he watched in his past life. The situation is very strange, but by now, Andrew had accepted his new life. After all, it's a new opportunity to fulfill his dream. This time, he won't fail, although technically, he didn't fail before. He was on his way to becoming a great player, but his heart failed him. "Life is good," Andrew murmured, smiling as he remembered the 10 years since he started living in this new body and with his new family. Football is still the same as in his past life, he's passionate about it and loves playing. What's different here is his family. His uncles and cousins, his grandfather, his new parents, and now a new sister. Before, he was always alone with his grandfather, and after he died, he was left all alone. "Let's give it our all," he thought as he increased his speed. After 30 minutes, he finished his circuit and headed home. He was sweaty, but with the same enthusiastic expression as always. "Here you go, dear," Mrs. Bethany said as she came downstairs and handed Andrew a cold bottle of water and a towel. "Thanks," Andrew said, taking the bottle and drinking it very quickly. "Cold water is the best," he said after finishing the bottle. Then he took the towel and wiped the sweat from his face. "It was Jacob's idea," Bethany whispered with a smile. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Jacob," Andrew shouted, looking up and waving at the elderly man sitting in a reclining chair. "Tish," Jacob huffed, looking away. "Always so shy. I'll clean the towel and return it to you," Andrew said. "No need, I'll take care of washing it," Bethany said, shaking her head. "Sorry for the trouble," Andrew said, scratching his cheek. "It's nothing, you always help us," she replied. After that, Andrew went inside. It was already 8 o'clock, and his parents were awake, preparing breakfast. They weren't surprised to see him awake at this hour, all sweaty. "Go take a shower. I'll make breakfast," Cameron said from the kitchen. "Okay, it should be 3 scrambled eggs with..." Before Andrew could finish explaining his breakfast, Cameron interrupted, "I know. 3 scrambled eggs with 2 slices of whole wheat toast with peanut butter, accompanied by a vanilla protein shake with a banana and milk." Andrew nodded and headed to the bathroom. "I don't know how he eats so much and doesn't gain weight," Mitchell commented, still not believing everything Andrew ate. "He burns the calories in his training, and any excess turns into muscle mass, or something like that," he explained, Cameron said with a puzzled look. Andrew quickly showered and had breakfast with Mitchell and Cameron, who, after finishing, ordered a taxi to head to the airport. They already had their suitcases and everything else ready. "Remember, if anyone asks, we went to celebrate our anniversary," Mitchell said at the door of the house, looking at Andrew. The adoption of the baby was something no one in the family knew. Only Andrew and the 2 of them. "Yeah, I got it," Andrew nodded. "What if Claire tells you that our anniversary was 2 months ago?" Cameron asked. "I'll reply that we couldn't celebrate because of Father's work and that we waited until the holidays," Andrew answered, having already studied the responses Mitchell and Cameron gave him to handle any situation. "That's it, you've got it. We're leaving, be good and have fun. We'll come back with your new little sister," Cameron said excitedly, shouting the last part. Mitchell motioned for him to keep it down since it was supposed to be a secret. They said their goodbyes to Andrew and got into the cab. "The house to myself," Andrew muttered as he entered and closed the door behind him. It was still too early to message his friends about the little get-together he was having that night. Most likely, they were still asleep. He decided to play video games and then do his individual football training. As he played Fallout 3, Andrew thought about high school, especially football. At this stage, things are more serious compared to middle school. There's a state tournament, not just a district one. In his past life, he managed to win the state tournament, although he died right after making the pass that resulted in a touchdown. State tournaments are closely watched by recruiters from both local and national universities, looking for new talent. Players who stand out in these tournaments can receive sports scholarships from universities with top-tier football programs, which is the first step toward a professional career. Andrew is confident for 2 reasons. First, he has already experienced playing in a state tournament and advancing through all the stages as a starting quarterback. Second, his level as a quarterback and player has improved compared to his past self. His technique has improved after 10 years of training, and his physique is better than Ethan's past one, despite being only 15 years old, 1 year younger than before. However, he will take this stage very seriously, as he can stand out from the beginning and attract the attention of university recruiters or even NFL scouts. After finishing his gaming session, he used the backyard to practice passes and different drills. He finished at 3 p.m., taking brief breaks to catch his breath and drink water. Messages sent, thought Andrew, having already informed his friends about the gathering that night. He told them they could invite their classmates if they wanted. As for him, he prefers fewer people, as there will be less to clean up afterward. Also, his sleep routine would be affected, but it's just 1 day. It's not a big problem. 34 comments 0 vote. What? Dunphy House. In a few hours, I'll be there with the girls. You're finally throwing a party, said Haley, brushing her hair in front of her mirror while talking on her cell phone in her room. It's not a party, just a few people. Don't invite too many people, said Andrew, who was on the other end of the phone talking to his cousin, Haley. Relax. It'll just be my closest friends. With your friends, we'll be about 12 people, Haley replied with a slight smile. Will you be coming with your new boyfriend? I want to meet him, Andrew asked. With Dylan. Why do you ask? Haley said in a nervous tone for some reason. Hey, relax, I'm not your mom, I just want to meet him. I want to see if you can finally last more than a month in a relationship, Andrew responded mockingly. Don't make fun of me, Haley yelled indignantly. I won't go with him, she added firmly. Andrew didn't understand why she didn't want to invite him, but he dropped the subject. Just then, behind the door to Haley and Alex's room, Claire walked in with a basket of dirty clothes. It seemed like she had been eavesdropping on the conversation for a while, as she immediately began firing questions one after another. A party? When? Since when does Andrew throw parties? Do Mitchell and Cameron know about this? Where are they? Were you eavesdropping, Mom? Haley asked, raising her voice and sounding offended. Eavesdropping? Of course not. I'm just doing laundry, Claire immediately denied, placing the basket of clothes at the foot of the bed. Give me the phone, Claire said, making a hand gesture. She wanted to talk to Andrew, as Haley wouldn't answer any of her questions. Mom, Haley complained at such an irrational request. Claire didn't change her expression and made the gesture with her hand again. Haley knew she had no choice but to hand over the phone. Always so controlling. Here, and you'll see it's nothing, Haley shouted, slamming the phone into Claire's hand, who didn't care about her daughter's yelling. Stop screaming like a pig. I want to study, Alex said, lifting her eyes from her book, unable to tolerate her older sister's annoying voice any longer. Pig, Haley repeated, turning around and glaring at Alex in anger. You should see your little, chubby nose. That's the nose of a pig. Besides, are you studying during vacation? Your social life is so sad. I guess you'll spend your Saturday night alone, studying, Haley said. A shouting and shrieking argument began between the two sisters, insulting each other mercilessly about their tastes, fashion choices, and so on. Silence, girls, Claire shouted suddenly, and both fell silent, though they continued glaring at each other. Alex grabbed her notebook, book, and pen, and stormed out of the room, offended. Once silence was achieved, Claire put the phone to her ear. Andy. Hi, Aunt, did they stop yelling? Andrew asked on the other end. He had pulled the phone away from his ear a while ago because the shouting was so loud. Just a little argument. By the way, are you having a party at home? Do your parents know? Where are they? Claire asked, wanting to know everything. Andrew spoke with Claire for over 10 minutes to explain everything. In the end, she agreed to take Haley, as she trusted him and believed it wouldn't be a party, just a gathering of classmates. Also, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson would be there to look after them in case anything went wrong. I'll pick you up at 10:30, Claire said, handing the phone back to Haley, who had sat at the edge of her bed, waiting with her arms crossed. That early? I'll be there for less than 4 hours. I'll be with Andy, what are you worried about? Haley said, trying to negotiate for more time. You wouldn't understand. 10:30 or nothing, Claire said firmly as she grabbed the laundry basket and left the room. I know you're making fun of me. You don't want me to pick you up at 10, Claire said, with her back to Haley, who was indeed mimicking her mother's face with exaggerated expressions. Do you have eyes on your back? Haley shouted, making sure to close the door so her mother wouldn't come back in. What were we talking about? Haley asked, picking up the phone. Her tone, which had been annoyed and angry, changed to a pleasant one as a smile formed on her face upon hearing Andrew's voice. Pritchett Tucker House. Andrew glanced at the clock in the living room of his house. It was 10 minutes to 7 in the evening. At that time, his friends, his cousin, and her friends would start arriving for the mini-party that his parents had forced him to throw. As for Haley, somehow she found out and invited her friends, who share a class with Andrew. Andrew walked toward his room and tried the doorknob. Locked, he murmured. No one would enter his cave room. First, he didn't want his figures and posters ruined, and secondly, no one knew he was a geek. Only his parents, Haley, and the rest of the family. He didn't know why he kept it hidden from his school and football friends. Maybe he did it subconsciously because he might get teased or receive strange looks. Nerds or geeks don't have the best reputation at school. On the other hand, Andrew didn't see a reason to tell Archie, Reggie, and the others about his geeky interests, as they didn't share those interests. Why would he tell them if in the end they wouldn't be able to talk about Star Wars, video games, or anything like that? How did this become a secret? Andrew wondered as he sat on the living room couch. He wasn't afraid of facing teasing or strange looks. Unlike the nerds, he knew how to defend himself. If he had to fight against an annoying bully, he would, and most likely, he would win thanks to his elite physique for his age. Whatever, he thought, shrugging as he grabbed a handful of Lay's chips and ate them. On the coffee table in the living room, there were various snacks, sodas, and glasses. Mitchell and Cameron had already bought everything needed for him to throw this little party at home. At exactly 7 o'clock, someone rang the doorbell. Andrew got up and opened the door. Archie and Kevin had arrived. Archie's dad brought them. He was a friendly middle-aged man. They greeted each other with laughter and a handshake before entering the house. In less than 10 minutes, everyone had arrived. They were very punctual, as it was the first time Andrew had hosted a gathering at his house, and no one wanted to miss it. Don't do anything crazy, I'll ask for Mrs. Thompson's number just in case, Claire said from the door, looking toward the upstairs. Mom, stop embarrassing me, Haley whispered to Claire. Her friends were beside her, and she didn't want them to notice how crazy her mom was. She'll give me the house phone number. She doesn't know how to use a cell phone, Andrew said, cooperating with Claire, who was satisfied with his willing cooperation. You should learn from your cousin, young lady, Claire said, taking out her phone and writing down the number Andrew had given her. Haley huffed slightly and entered the house, followed by her friends. Andrew said goodbye to his aunt and followed them. Hey, Haley, Andrew called, but she didn't hear him as she was talking with her friends. Little Hal, can you hear me? Andrew called again, raising his voice. Little Hal, repeated one of Haley's friends, raising an eyebrow. Her name is Veronica. She has long, straight black hair, a tan complexion, and is wearing a black t-shirt with a matching skirt. I told you not to call me that anymore, Haley exclaimed, turning slightly red and pushing Andrew aside to speak with him privately. Sorry, I forgot, Andrew said with a slight smile. It's very easy to annoy Haley. What do you want? Haley asked. You said there would be 12 people, but I see more than 12. More than half the class is here, and people I barely recognize, Andrew replied. There were already 18 people in his house. His trusted friends were Reggie, Archie, Kevin, and Steve, all from the football team. Hey, relax, they're all classmates. Of course, they don't want to miss your party, especially since there are no parents. Don't be a party pooper, Haley said with a slight smile. All they need is alcohol, but it's impossible for them to get any since they're only 14-15 years old. It's not a party, Andrew said, crossing his arms. Stop being so grumpy, Haley said, giving him a light tap on the shoulder before heading toward the living room where everyone was chatting and laughing. Am I grumpy? Andrew wondered with a strange expression. He's usually the most fun and enthusiastic of them all, maybe he should relax a bit. Just then, the doorbell rang again. Andrew, who was near the door, headed back there. More people, Andrew thought as he opened the door and saw two boys his age. There was a car parked on the street with a middle-aged woman in the driver's seat. She must be the mother of one of these boys who brought them here. One of the boys was short and slim, with brown hair cut in a bowl style that gave him a peculiar look. He had blue eyes and was wearing a turtleneck sweater. He wore tight pants and an odd belt buckle. Next to him was another boy, a bit shorter and with a slightly thicker build. He had brown hair that fell messily over his forehead and brown eyes. The most distinctive thing about him was the thick, square-framed glasses he wore, which were very noticeable. Hey, Andrew said, trying to remember the names of these two boys. They must be from his class, and it would be rude not to know their names. Their faces were familiar, but he didn't know from where. Hi, I'm Howard, said the boy with the bowl haircut, forcing a smile as friendly as he could. I came to check out the party. Hope there's food, and I hope there are girls too, he added confidently, though not entirely, as it was a front he was trying to put on in front of Andrew. I'm Leonard, we share science class, remember, said the other boy, adjusting his glasses and avoiding eye contact. Andrew frowned, looking confused. What? He murmured, trying to process what he had just heard. I told you he wouldn't remember us. We only share one class, Leonard whispered to Howard, his voice filled with nervousness. Not getting into the party would be embarrassing. Relax, don't show your nerves, act confident and leave everything to me, Howard whispered back while standing up straighter and adjusting his sweater as if it were a fancy suit. It was clear he was trying to project confidence he didn't actually feel. Andrew watched them in silence. Their appearances, names, even their personalities, everything felt unsettlingly familiar. They were like two characters he knew very well from his past life. It couldn't be true, right? He had been reborn into the world of Modern Family, but this was too strange. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was right. Suddenly, he felt the urge to check something. He parted his lips with a mix of doubt and curiosity, and finally, he spoke, Howard Wolowitz and Leonard Hofstadter. He asked, staring at both of them intently. Howard and Leonard exchanged surprised looks, their eyes wide open. Then, an enthusiastic smile lit up their faces. Yes, Howard exclaimed, almost proudly. That's us. Leonard, a little more shy, nodded but was also smiling at the fact that Andrew had remembered their last names. I didn't think you'd remember us, this is incredible. You even pronounced my last name correctly, he said, unable to hide a bit of relief. Andrew felt a mix of surprise and confusion. So it was true. The characters from The Big Bang Theory were standing right in front of him, in the flesh. What the hell was going on right now? 41 comments, 0 vote. Truth or dare? Before entering the house, Howard glanced at the vehicle parked by the curb. "Ma, don't forget you have to pick us up at 11. Howard shouted, his voice deeper and raspier, different from his usual voice. "I know, I don't have Alzheimer, I'm still young," the woman responded from inside the car, her tone louder than Howard's, echoing through the air like thunder. Andrew couldn't help but crack a small smile at the exchange between Howard and his mother. It reminded him of many comedic scenes from the TV show he had watched. "Hi, Mrs. Wallowitz," Andrew shouted with a smile on his face, enjoying the moment. "Who's that boy?" Debbie asked, her tone still loud and gruff. "If you don't know him, Howie, don't let him in." "How could I not let him in when he's the owner of the house?" Howard quickly replied, his exasperation barely contained. "Are you blind? Didn't you see him open the door for us? I'm just a concerned mother," Debbie yelled back from the car, not losing an ounce of her authority. "And you should be nicer to your mother. You never know who might be a respectable citizen or a madman with an axe." Leonard, feeling a bit uncomfortable, simply smiled. Andrew turned to him. "Are they always like this?" he asked with an fun smile. "Yeah, you'll get used to it," Leonard replied shyly, having heard that kind of conversation many times before. Andrew nodded while Howard and his mother continued yelling at each other in their peculiar exchange. Finally, Howard said goodbye to his mother and entered the house alongside Leonard, guided by Andrew. They reached the living room, and everyone turned to look at them, curious to know the identities of the new arrivals. However, no one recognized Leonard or Howard. Strange looks spread across the faces of those present as they eyed the two unfamiliar boys. "Who are they?" Reggie asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "Howard and Leonard. We shared a class once, so it's hard to recognize them," Andrew explained as he introduced them. He knew both of them were shy and already frozen in place, making it unlikely they'd introduce themselves in front of more than 15 people. At the middle school Andrew attended, there were over 300 students in his grade, making it very difficult to know everyone your age since the school divided students into different classes. The others nodded at Andrew's introduction of these two strangers and quickly lost interest, resuming their previous conversations. Andrew invited Leonard and Howard to sit in a couple of chairs, but before he could talk to them further, he was pulled aside by his friends and other classmates. "Damn, I want to talk to them," Andrew thought as he was surrounded by the others, unable to even see Leonard or Howard anymore. He didn't understand why they were his age when they should be over 20 by this point in time. Nor did he understand why they were here. Is this some kind of crossover? If it is, the timeline is seriously messed up. Andrew internally shrugged and decided to accept it all easily. He had already gone through a similar existential crisis when he found out he was in a world where the characters from Modern Family were real. While Andrew chatted with his friends about football, the girls whispered among themselves in a tight circle farther away from the boys. As for Howard and Leonard, they were sitting alone, speaking in hushed tones. Howard was quietly telling Leonard about his plan to get a girlfriend tonight and start high school on a high note. "Are you crazy?" Haley asked in a low voice, glancing at her friend Veronica. All the girls were gossiping in a small circle. Veronica had just announced that she was planning to ask Andrew out. "Why, I'm pretty sure my chances of success are high," said Veronica with a hint of narcissism. She was one of the most popular girls, along with Haley. "And what makes you say that?" Haley asked, her brow slightly furrowed. "Why are you so against it? Are you jealous?" One of the girls teased with a giggle, looking at Haley, and the whole group began laughing softly. "Are you in love with your cousin? Are we in Alabama now?" Well, they're not blood related. The girls were notorious gossips and knew that Andrew was adopted. After all, his parents were a gay couple. Besides, Andrew wasn't embarrassed about his identity as an adopted child. "That's not it," Haley snapped angrily, and the laughter quickly stopped. They all knew better than to push her too far. "I just don't want him to reject you in front of everyone. We all know he's a football fanatic who dreams of going pro. Why do you think he's never had a girlfriend?" Haley said, trying to sound as rational as possible. The girls fell silent, lost in thought. Haley had a point. Everyone knew about Andrew's dreams since he spoke about it openly. And being one of the most popular kids, anything he said tended to spread quickly. Aspiring to go pro made him obsessed with training, leaving no room for a love life. I know all that, Veronica began, a slight confident smile on her face. I'm going to join the cheerleading squad and support him as his girlfriend. Besides, my confidence comes from the fact that we talked every day over messages, she added proudly, holding up her phone to show a long chat she had with Andrew. Oh, the group of girls exclaimed, surprised by the extensive chat history between Veronica and Andrew. In the end, Veronica decided to confess her feelings during a game of Truth or Dare, where she and one of her friends planned to pull off a small act in front of everyone. She was confident, though she couldn't deny feeling a bit nervous. As for Haley, she refused to participate. She crossed her arms and stayed silent for the rest of the gathering. At one point, the group of teenagers formed a large circle and began playing Truth or Dare. Andrew made sure to include Leonard and Howard, otherwise, they would have been ignored and left out. The game moved clockwise, with dares that were funny and truths that were awkward, designed to embarrass and make everyone laugh. Eventually, it was Howard's turn, and the entire circle fell silent. Usually, it was one of your friends who asked you, Truth or Dare, and came up with something fun, but Leonard was too shy to speak in front of everyone, and Howard didn't have any friends besides him. So, Andrew decided to step up. Truth or Dare, Howard? Andrew asked with a friendly smile. Howard started thinking as fast as he could. Truth? No, I don't want him asking if it's true that I'm a virgin or something like that. There are too many ways for them to make fun of me, Howard thought, feeling nervous about these kinds of social games. Andrew didn't seem like a bad person, but you could never be too sure, and he'd already been the target of many of these jokes before. D-Dare, Howard stuttered in response. It was better to be humiliated physically than emotionally. Let's see, Andrew said, thinking of a fun but not extreme dare, something that everyone, including Howard, could enjoy. I've got it, do 10 push-ups, he added with a smile. This training maniac, everyone thought, their faces showing mild exasperation. Howard grimaced slightly. He was terrible at anything involving physical activity. He's just trying to make fun of my non-existent strength, Howard thought, unsure of what to do. For starters, he didn't even know how to do a proper push-up. Should he step into the center of the circle and try to do pathetic push-ups, failing miserably and giving everyone something to laugh at? Come on, I'll show you the proper push-up technique, Andrew said, walking toward the center of the circle. Howard followed him with newfound hope, encouraged by Andrew's positive attitude. Andrew explained the technique perfectly. It was simple, and someone as intelligent as Howard understood it on the first try. Howard placed his hands firmly on the ground at shoulder width and his feet together, forming a straight line from his head to his heels. As he attempted his first push-up, he felt a sense of relief upon realizing his body was cooperating. He lowered himself and pushed back up carefully, noting that he understood the technique and could maintain proper form. Andrew smiled faintly at this. He knew Howard hated sports, but he was still a teenager, and with his slim build, he should be able to lift his own weight. Howard managed the second and third push-ups smoothly, though his breathing began to quicken. Everyone watched in silence. The girls, however, didn't seem particularly interested in this dull dare, especially since they didn't even know Howard. The boys from the football team watched Howard with more serious expressions, their eyes fixed on him as he pushed through his fifth push-up. Howard's skinny arms started to tremble by the sixth push-up. Come on, you are almost there, Andrew encouraged, kneeling down near Howard. Howard exhaled deeply and pushed harder, managing to complete the seventh and eighth push-ups. His body was shaking, and his face had turned bright red. The other boys from the team moved closer to the center of the circle and started cheering him on. Come on, Hofard, you've got this, Archie cheered. It's Howard, Howard mumbled with difficulty as he finished his ninth push-up. Haha, sorry about that, Archie replied, scratching his head. If you've got time to talk, you've got time for push-ups. Andrew interjected. With the team's encouragement, Howard managed to finish his 10th push-up. Even Leonard had joined in, whispering words of encouragement, though barely audible. Afterward, Howard collapsed to the floor. He hadn't expected that just 10 stupid push-ups would leave him this exhausted. His arms felt like jelly. Great job, you've got some strength in those arms, Reggie said, patting Howard on the back. Howard smiled faintly. It didn't feel so bad to be cheered on by everyone. I think you did more than Steve. Hey, that's not true, Steve exclaimed indignantly. He might have been the weakest in the group, but he could easily do more than 10 push-ups. Next, it was Leonard's turn. Andrew was the one to ask him, and Leonard chose dare. This time, the challenge was to do 15 bodyweight squats. Just like with Howard, Andrew explained the proper technique, and while Leonard was doing them, everyone cheered him on during the last few reps to help him push past his limits. He managed to do it and felt a weight lift off his shoulders as he succeeded. The girls watched from the sidelines, unable to believe what they were seeing. What was so exciting about two nerdy guys doing a bit of exercise? Finally, the moment Veronica had been waiting for arrived. "All right, Sarah, it's your turn. Ask me," Veronica said, giving her friend Sarah a knowing look. "Truth or dare?" Sarah asked with a slight smile. Suddenly, all the girls were paying attention, much more than during the previous rounds. "Truth," Veronica answered without hesitation. "Is it true that you like Andrew?" Sarah asked, and the room fell into absolute silence. "It's true," Veronica replied, trying to sound confident. She couldn't back out now. The boys exchanged surprised glances at her response. Even the girls looked taken aback, not expecting Veronica to be so bold and stick to her word. The silence in the room was almost tangible, with every pair of eyes now darting back and forth between Andrew and Veronica. The first kept a poker face, apparently processing what had just happened. "Andrew," said Veronica, looking at him. She had deliberately chosen a spot in the circle to have him on her right. "Yes, do you want to go out with me?" Veronica asked, and all the girls erupted in excited squeals, except for Haley. "This girl, she's got some nerve," Andrew thought as every eye in the circle turned to him, eagerly awaiting his response. Since when do girls confess in front of everyone? Doesn't she fear rejection and becoming the talk of the entire grade? Was her confidence that unshakable, or was this some kind of strategy to use social pressure? Andrew doubted Veronica had thought it through so deeply. It was probably just her natural self-confidence and maybe their chat over the holidays. Andrew had only replied out of politeness and because he was always friendly and enthusiastic with everyone. As she looked at him with a mix of anticipation and bravery, Andrew carefully considered his response. The honest answer would be a firm no. But he also understood how fragile emotions could be during adolescence. Rejecting her in front of everyone would feel like a public humiliation, and that wasn't something he wanted to put her through. "If I say yes now, I can always find a way to end things later, without causing a scene or hurting her as much," he reasoned, making his decision. "Sure, Veronica," Andrew replied, offering her a faint smile. The girls around them burst into excited cheers. A wide smile spread across Veronica's face as she felt her heart about to explode. "That's great," Veronica murmured to herself, relieved. She had genuinely thought he was going to reject her. It would have been so depressing and humiliating. In those brief seconds of waiting, her world had frozen. For the first time, she considered what would happen if she were rejected, and the thought had been horrifying. By 10:30 p.m., many parents had arrived to pick up their kids. Claire showed up right on time, and Haley left with an angry huff. Why is she mad? Andrew wondered, confused, as he watched Haley climb into the car with Claire. At 2300 everyone left except Howard and Leonard. You can read 15 chapters in advance on my Patreon. Link. Web links at trian.com/nave07. 40 comments 0 vote. New friends. Happy New Year to all. ... My mom is always late, said Howard, sitting on the living room couch. It doesn't matter. We'll wait, it's still early, said Andrew, sitting on another couch. The room fell silent. Howard and Leonard sat next to each other, while Andrew sat across from them, watching them intently. Howard and Leonard started feeling uncomfortable with the silence and Andrew's inquisitive gaze. Are you guys seriously 15? Andrew asked, breaking the silence. What? Howard and Leonard responded, confused by the strange and sudden question. Your ids, please, Andrew said, extending his hand with his palm open. Howard and Leonard exchanged glances, unsure of what was going on. It was unusual to see Andrew so serious, so after hesitating for a moment, they handed over their ids. It was odd for him to suddenly doubt their age when he had previously acknowledged that they'd shared classes together. Andrew took both ids and examined them carefully. The names and birthdates matched. They were the same age as him. What kind of messed up world have I transmigrated into? Andrew wondered as he handed the ids back to Leonard and Howard, who sighed in relief for some reason. How many more characters from TV shows would he encounter in the future? Maybe he'd even run into movie characters. Who knew? Besides, there were some timeline changes, but there was nothing he could do to fix that. Did you guys have fun? Andrew asked as he leaned back on the couch. Yes, it was great. Howard and Leonard answered in unison. At first, neither of them thought they would actually fit in with Andrew's group or the popular crowd. But after playing Truth or Dare, they grew closer to Reggie, Steve, and the other members of the football team. They never expected the team to be so friendly to two nerds like them. This was thanks to Andrew, who had disciplined his friends from childhood not to become the stereotypical football bullies. That's good, Andrew said with a faint smile. What's it like to have a girlfriend? Howard asked out of nowhere. Leonard looked at his friend, shaking his head. He was clearly desperate to get a girlfriend or any kind of minimal female attention. It hasn't even been an hour since I started dating Veronica, Andrew replied. Well, that's true, Howard said, scratching his head. But you must have had a girlfriend before, right? He added. Girlfriend, Andrew thought, his gaze momentarily distant. In that brief moment, an image of a smiling girl from his past life flashed through his mind. No, Veronica is the first girlfriend I've ever had, Andrew replied. Howard and Leonard exchanged surprised glances. It was unusual for a quarterback who led his team to middle school championships 2 years in a row not to have a girlfriend. Still, they'd never heard rumors or seen him with any girl, so it seemed to be true. Now that I think about it, there was a rumor, Leonard murmured to himself, but Andrew caught it. What rumor? Andrew asked. Leonard froze, feeling nervous, as the rumor touched on a delicate topic. An irrelevant rumor, Howard interjected, trying to downplay it and steer the conversation away from an awkward situation. A rumor that I'm gay? Andrew asked, though he already knew exactly what the rumor was about. Leonard nodded slightly, relaxing when he noticed Andrew's calm expression. Since his parents are a gay couple and he never had a girlfriend throughout middle school, it was normal for such rumors to start circulating. With his position as the starting quarterback and his popularity, it was strange that he hadn't had a girlfriend, even if the relationship was short-lived. Haley had had many boyfriends, though most only lasted 2 weeks or less, and at most, they held hands or shared a quick kiss. Andrew couldn't deny that the rumor bothered him a bit, especially since it had spread so much in his school. Damn gossiping teenagers. Of course, he wasn't homophobic, but he was sure of his sexual orientation, which was heterosexual, so it was a little annoying that people were saying he was gay behind his back. Did you believe those rumors? Andrew asked, a bit curious. I never thought about it too much, Leonard replied. Honestly, he didn't care if Andrew was straight or gay. He wasn't even his friend, just a classmate and a popular guy, very different from him. For me, the rumor was true, Howard said bluntly, though his tone held no rejection or disdain if Andrew had actually been gay. If I were you, I would have had countless girlfriends. It would have been extremely easy. Since when does one of the most popular girls declare herself? Howard added enviously, still in disbelief about what had happened during the Truth or Dare just minutes ago. Howard was someone who thought about girls most of the time and ways to get a girlfriend, which ultimately never worked out. If he were in Andrew's shoes, he could easily get a girlfriend and would be the happiest guy in the world. Don't associate me with him, Leonard said, distancing himself from Howard. If you're that desperate, the girls will notice instantly and will only see you as a servant to use, Andrew said. I'm not desperate, Howard exclaimed. Really? Leonard and Andrew asked. Well, maybe a little, Howard admitted. It wasn't his fault. He saw that everyone else had partners, kisses, even more than that, while he remained a virgin with no experience. He didn't want to fall behind and be mocked even more than he already had been. Come on, I'll show you that those rumors are wrong, Andrew said as he stood up from the couch and headed toward his room. Leonard and Howard followed, curious. He took the key out of one of his pockets, unlocked the door, and opened it. Howard and Leonard walked in and looked around, astonished by the room in front of them. They stared at the Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and other figures, unable to believe what their eyes were seeing. Then their eyes moved to the posters hanging on the walls and then to the television with the Xbox. They also noticed the PC in the corner. Is this your room? Leonard asked, amazed. Yeah, Andrew replied, while searching for something under his bed. No way, Howard said, shaking his head. Was he really in the room of Andrew, the popular marshal of his class? His own cave was very similar, the only difference being the football decoration. Isn't this your evil brother's room? Howard asked, examining some limited edition X-Men comics in great condition. As for Leonard, he was looking at all the games Andrew had for the Xbox. There were so many, even some he didn't have, which was saying a lot. Do you think just because I'm good at a sport, I wouldn't like geek stuff? Andrew asked with a half smile, as he opened a small box with a key and took out some kind of album. Leonard and Howard exchanged glances, both unable to believe this discovery. It was even more surprising than when Veronica and Andrew started dating. No one at school knew that Andrew was a geek and nerd like them. Learning this made them feel closer to Andrew. After all, he was someone who shared their interests, and being so popular, it felt like a strange kind of achievement. Look, Andrew said, slowly opening the album as if he were revealing a secret treasure. Inside the album were photos. All of one person, specifically a woman. Padme Amidala, Leonard and Howard said in unison, recognizing the girl in the photos. It was actress Natalie Portman, who played Padme Amidala in the Star Wars movies Episodes 4. The album contained photos of Natalie portraying Padme. They were simply pictures from the films and some conferences the young actress attended where she was photographed. Andrew had found them online after an incessant search. Turn to the next page, Howard urged, wanting to keep seeing the beauty of Padme Amidala. Leonard, beside him, nodded, and Andrew turned the page. He had a huge collection of photos. Padme, the only person in the galaxy capable of making even a senator's outfit look sexy, Howard said, looking at the photos. Leonard and Andrew nodded several times at his comment. Where did you get so many photos? Leonard asked with a hint of envy. He was a big fan of Padme. The best female character in Star Wars, in his opinion. On the internet, obviously. I searched for all of them when I had, free time, Andrew replied with a strange smile. It was the first time he had shown this album to anyone. Leonard and Howard nodded, so engrossed in the album that they looked like a group of teenage girls flipping through a movie idol magazine. Andrew handed the album to Leonard, who took it carefully as if handling a sacred object. There were photos even he and Howard hadn't seen yet. They kept turning the pages, getting more and more amazed like fools, until the album came to an end. Cool, right, Andrew said as he closed the album. Now they knew he was heterosexual. Yeah, Padme is the best. Leonard nodded dreamily, imagining fictional scenarios where he was a Jedi protecting Padme. Damn Anakin for letting her die from sadness. Howard made a dismissive sound at Leonard's statement, and along with Andrew, they looked at him with slightly furrowed brows. What? Howard asked. What was that noise? Andrew asked. The TSSH. Howard repeated the sound. That was my way of expressing how absurd Leonard's statement was, he added. Absurd, Leonard repeated. I forgot that you prefer Leia, he added with a slight sneer of disapproval. You prefer Leia, that woman with a blank face and outdated hairstyle, Andrew said, unable to believe what he was hearing. Hey, show some respect for Princess Leia, Howard yelled, offended. You only like Leia because of the gold bikini. I know where you hide the poster in your room. If your mom sees it, she'll give you a beating, Leonard said. I guess his loyalty is bought with a little skin, Andrew said with a disdainful expression. It's not about that, assholes, Howard exclaimed, turning red as a tomato. It's about the character. Her backstory is way better than Padme's. You guys just focus on Natalie Portman's pretty face and that she's almost our age. Admit it, he added, going on the offensive. Leonard and Andrew's expressions darkened. Howard was right, but they'd never admit it. Andrew, in his past life, was a huge fan of Padme, but Natalie Portman was already a woman in her 40s, so he wasn't as big of a fan of her, since their ages were very different. But now, it's different. Natalie Portman is only 2 years older than him. He doesn't know why, as she should be older, maybe in her mid-20s, but this timeline is different from his past life. Here, Howard and Leonard, who should be almost 30 years old by now, are only 15. So, since they're almost the same age, he feels more connected and allows himself to get more carried away by Padme's character. The same goes for Leonard. Without Padme, there would be no Leia, no Luke, no Darth Vader. So there would be no Star Wars, end of discussion, concluded Andrew as he put the album back in its place, locking it up. This shameless, Howard thought, about to continue the discussion, but 2 honks were heard. He looked out the window and saw his mom's car. It's time to go, he said a little depressed. It was fun having a discussion with 3 people. It was always just him and Leonard. Adding Andrew brought a fresh vibe. The three of them left the room in silence, heading towards the entrance of the house. Andrew opened the door, and Leonard and Howard stayed silent for a few seconds. It was fun. When will you have another gathering? Leonard asked with some expectation. Probably not something like this again. The season is starting, and I need to focus on football, Andrew replied, although the truth was that parties weren't something he enjoyed much. He was somewhat forced to throw it by his parents. Oh, right, well, we'll see each other at school, if we end up in any shared classes, Leonard said, a bit downcast. You can come over tomorrow if you want. Stay the night, we can watch the Star Wars saga and play video games, Andrew suggested. Leonard and Howard immediately accepted, before Andrew could even think whether he'd be rejected or not. And by the way, keep everything you saw in my room a secret, he added with a friendly smile that scared Leonard and Howard. After they left, Andrew went to sleep in a good mood. He never thought he would finally have two friends with whom to share his second and secret hobby. Plus, they were none other than Leonard and Howard, two geniuses and characters from a show he watched in his past life. 35 comments 0 vote. Become a YouTuber. On Saturday at 6 in the evening, Leonard and Howard returned to Andrew's house, much to their surprise. They never imagined in their wildest dreams that the most popular guy in their grade would be a nerd like them, into pop culture and video games. They also realized that no one at school knew about Andrew's secret hobby. Only they knew, and that made it feel even more special. Mrs. Thompson spoke with Howard's mother, telling her that she would keep an eye on them to make sure they didn't do anything dangerous and that everything would be fine since they were staying the night. Guys' night, Howard shouted as he entered Andrew's room with a big smile. It was the first time he had been invited to a friend's house, not counting Leonard. Plus, Andrew wasn't an unpopular guy like most of the nerdy classmates he knew, or like himself. Howard tossed his backpack onto Andrew's bed and opened it, revealing lots of junk food, sodas, comics, and a few Xbox video games. Leonard did the same. In his backpack, there were mostly DVDs, including Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, Christopher Nolan's Batman, Back to the Future, among others. I don't think we have enough time to watch all these movies and play video games, Andrew commented, a little surprised by the amount of stuff Leonard and Howard had brought. We do, Leonard and Howard said in unison, handing Andrew a written sheet, which he took and examined. A schedule, Andrew murmured with a puzzled expression. Each time slot had a movie or video game listed, along with how long they would last. Breaks were also planned for group discussions. Yeah, we did it just yesterday. Thanks to the internet, Howard said with a smile. They would make the most of every hour. They had all night, and since tomorrow was Sunday, they could sleep in. The first thing they did was put on Spider-Man 1, starring Tobey Maguire, from 2002. The movie lasted 2 hours, and during it, they ate junk food and drank soda. I'll have to burn off these calories later, Andrew thought. It wasn't healthy to eat this way, but his body was young, and he could afford the occasional indulgence. 99% of the time, he ate healthily, so a single day off from his diet wasn't a big deal. At 8 o'clock, they ordered pizza, and while eating, they watched the second and third Spider-Man movies, completing the trilogy. It was almost 1 a.m. when they finished watching all 3 films. Which one did you think was the best movie? Andrew asked, getting up and stretching. His legs were numb, and his body felt stiff. Of course, the third one, Howard replied. The first one, without a doubt, Leonard answered, looking at Howard, who returned the stare. The third, seriously, Howard, Andrew said, and along with Leonard, they looked at him with judging eyes. Why do they always turn against me? Howard thought. The third one was the highest-grossing film of the trilogy, but fans didn't like it as much as the first and second. The best Peter Parker is in the third. He's popular and dark. Don't tell me you didn't like the dance he does, leaving all the girls speechless, Howard said, trying to justify himself, but only earning more dismissive looks from Leonard and Andrew. It was expected that you'd like it for that reason, Leonard said, shaking his head. A dark and cool Peter. You don't understand the essence of Spider-Man, Andrew commented. I do understand, I just prefer that Peter who doesn't mess around. And why do you prefer the first one, Leonard? Because a nerd like you gets powers and suddenly becomes cool. You're not that different from me, Howard said, and Leonard's expression darkened because Howard was right. Ha, I knew it. Come on, Leonard, if you were given spider powers, the most daring thing you'd do is climb walls as fast as possible so the bullies wouldn't beat you up, Howard said with a victorious smile. The best one is the second, Andrew interrupted, trying to hold back his laughter from Howard's comment. The best villain is Dr. Ock, and Peter faces the most important decisions. There's great character development, he added. You guys stick with the clumsy nerd from the first one and the existentialism of the second. I'll stick with the Peter who doesn't let himself be stepped on. Case closed, Howard said, knowing they wouldn't reach an agreement. They had an itinerary to follow, and they couldn't waste time on a discussion that would go nowhere. Next was to play video games, but not on the Xbox, on the PC. Better not download any viruses, Andrew commented, standing behind Howard, who was sitting in the chair in front of the computer. Relax, I'm an expert in IT. I already downloaded this game on my PC, and nothing happened, Howard said with a confident smile. Quickly and with great agility, he entered the website and started downloading a horror game they were supposed to play that night. The game would take a while to download, so they had a brief break, which Andrew took advantage of to go to the bathroom. When he returned to his room, he saw Leonard and Howard intently watching the computer screen. They were watching a video, and from the speakers, a voice Andrew recognized was coming out. It was his voice. I forgot about the videos I recorded, Andrew thought with embarrassment, rushing over to the computer. Without warning, he paused the video and closed the tab, pushing Leonard and Howard aside. Hey, I was watching that, Howard complained, looking at Andrew with a frown. You were about to get the attack helicopter, Leonard said, still very hooked on the video. That video is private, Andrew said with a strange expression because of the complaints from the two guys. I've never seen a video like that. The quality is really good, Howard said, with a hand on his chin. The videos he found online about video games were usually of poor quality and often short in length. He'd never seen a format like the one he'd just watched. Even though the video was only 3 minutes in, he saw that it had 12 minutes of duration. Very strange. Yeah, how did you do it? Leonard asked curiously, looking at Andrew. It wasn't difficult. I used software to record the screen of the PC while I played and commented. Then I transferred the video to a video editor to cut out any irrelevant parts, if there were any, Andrew replied. In his past life, he had watched many YouTubers who focused on video games. He was a big consumer of that content. One of his unfulfilled dreams was to become a YouTuber like that. There were several reasons. He didn't have time because of football and his hectic life, training, studying, eating well, even doing some odd jobs to make money, etc. The little spare time he had, he used to relax by watching series, movies, or playing video games. However, in this life, it's different. Since he was reborn, he had a lot of free time on his hands. His family took care of all his needs, so his responsibilities were much fewer compared to before. In his free time, he recorded some Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare gameplay and edited them, all from his PC. It was easier to play and record from there. He just never uploaded them to YouTube. Can we finish watching the video? Leonard asked. Howard nodded and looked at Andrew, waiting for a positive response. Did they really want to watch it? Andrew thought, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. It was strange for them to watch one of his videos, especially since he had commented on it himself. But seeing the enthusiasm on Leonard and Howard's faces, he decided to let them finish watching the video. He sat on his bed, watching as his friends followed the gameplay closely. Every now and then, they would make a comment, be surprised by one of his eliminations, or laugh at his jokes in the recording. Andrew realized how quickly they had gotten hooked and understood why. First, it's 2008. YouTube was barely 3 years old since its founding, and the videos Andrew used to watch in 2024 were infinitely superior to those back then. The gameplay format didn't even exist as such, and the content on the platform was mostly homemade videos, comedy clips, music, and the occasional viral video. What little there was of video games were low-quality recordings, with no editing, mostly made with external cameras pointing at the screen. In contrast, his video was different. It had good image quality, a touch of editing, and entertaining and funny commentary, features that practically no one on YouTube was using. Leonard and Howard were watching something new, something that not only looked good but also had humor and useful tips. Andrew, without meaning to, had created a pioneering format for this era. He had just tried to replicate the gameplay videos he used to watch in his past life, adding his own twist, or at least attempting to. Should I upload it? He thought, a doubtful look on his face. He hadn't expected his friends to enjoy it so much. He knew they represented the kind of audience he wanted to reach. Maybe he had a unique opportunity to do something big with this kind of content. Being a pioneer, coupled with the high video quality, editing, and his commentary, could help him achieve his dream of becoming a YouTuber. When the gameplay ended, Leonard and Howard didn't stop there. They found 2 more videos in the same folder and immediately played them, fascinated by Andrew's tricks, plays, and spontaneous advice during the matches. When they finished, both turned to him with excitement. "You have to upload this to YouTube, Andrew. The tips are really good," Leonard said, adjusting his glasses, which had almost fallen off from his sudden enthusiasm. Howard nodded eagerly. Yeah, you have to upload them right now. They're fun, and you give tips even I could use. And I'm good at Call of Duty, plus, I've never seen a video like this on YouTube before." "Do you really think I should?" Andrew asked, trying to sound nonchalant but clearly flattered. "It's always nice to get positive feedback on something you worked on." "Yeah, what's there to lose?" Leonard replied. "You could help a lot of noobs," Howard added with a smirk. Andrew laughed, feeling excited. "All right, if you insist, I'll do it right now." He sat down at the PC and opened YouTube, navigating to his channel tab. He had created the channel back in 2005 under the nickname Player Z, the first thing that came to mind. With a few clicks, he uploaded the video, gave it a title, and hit the upload button. "There it goes, my first video," Andrew said, a little nervous. He was more anxious than during his recent football games, though those had felt easy to him given his current skills. "What's going on? Why is it taking so long?" Andrew asked, frowning as he stared at the screen. "Your video is longer than most others. Maybe in the future, the internet will be faster for stuff like this," Leonard replied. "Right, I forgot about that," Andrew thought, crossing his arms as he watched the painfully slow progress bar barely move. Finally, when the upload bar reached 100%, the video was live on the platform. "What now?" Andrew asked. "Now, Player Z, get ready to go viral, or at least get those 5 stars from the 2 of us," Howard said with a grin. On YouTube, the like and dislike buttons didn't exist yet. Instead, it used a 5-star rating system. Comments were available, though. The 3 of them laughed and gathered around the computer, ready to refresh the page as many times as it took to see if anyone discovered the video, gave it stars, or, in the best-case scenario, left a comment. The night went on. They chatted and kept refreshing the page every now and then, throwing out the itinerary Howard and Leonard had originally planned. Andrew even suggested that they make videos like his. He believed they had the skills for gaming and were smart enough to provide entertaining commentary, at least that's what Andrew thought, knowing them from the TV show. However, neither of them seemed very enthusiastic. They didn't see themselves as the kind of people who could create interesting or entertaining videos. They felt they lacked Andrew's charisma and ability to talk to himself while coming up with engaging things to say. The night flew by. Andrew had more fun than he expected. He'd never had friends to share his hobbies of video games and geek culture with before. They finally went to bed. Howard and Leonard slept on mattresses on the floor. Since it was summer and hot, they didn't need blankets. As for Andrew's first video, it didn't receive any stars, comments, or subscribers. Howard and Leonard promised to subscribe once they got back home and were on their own computers. 37 comments, 0 vote. Pilot eye. Ringing. An annoying sound echoed through the pitch-dark room. Andrew's phone screen lit up, and the sound kept ringing in the room. "Turn that thing off," Howard mumbled groggily, covering his face with a pillow. On the other mattress, Leonard grunted in irritation at the relentless noise. Andrew was sound asleep. After a few seconds, he moved his hand toward the nightstand, fumbling a bit before finally grabbing the phone. He brought it to his ear and pressed the button to answer the call. "Yeah?" Andrew asked in a raspy voice. "Andrew, you finally picked up," said the voice on the other end, which belonged to Mitchell. "What's wrong with your voice?" Mitchell added, puzzled. "I was sleeping," Andrew explained curtly, struggling to stay awake. "Sleeping? It should be past 11 in the morning in California," Mitchell muttered to himself, confused. His son always woke up early in the morning to stick to his routine without fail, not even on holidays or weekends. There had been exceptions, but very few, like Christmas, New Year's, or some other important date. "What happened?" Is everything okay? Andrew asked slowly, his voice still groggy. They had gone to bed at 7 in the morning, just as the sun rose, so he hadn't even slept a full 5 hours. Yes, everything went well. You'll meet your little sister in just a few hours. We're running a bit late and making the last stop. I just wanted to let you know we'll be arriving around 5, Mitchell explained happily, glancing at Lily, who was sound asleep while Cameron watched over her. Great, Andrew commented, though his tone sounded anything but enthusiastic, thanks to his exhaustion. The call lasted a little longer, with Andrew only giving monosyllabic responses until he finally said goodbye and could go back to sleep. 5 minutes later, ringing, 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 ringing. Turn that thing off, Howard complained, covering his ears with the pillow. Now what? Andrew thought, answering the phone again. Hi, he said as he picked up. Andrew, is that you? Asked a confused female voice on the other end. Yes, Aunt, it's me, what's going on? Andrew replied. At another time, he might have been surprised that his aunt, Claire, was calling on a Sunday, but he was far too sleepy, focusing only on responding and not falling asleep. Oh, I thought I had dialed the wrong number, Claire murmured. She had expected the raspy, deep voice on the other end to belong to a middle-aged smoker, not her energetic nephew who always seemed to have 150% energy. Can you come to the house? I need you here, Claire said, getting straight to the point. Now, Andrew asked. No, half an hour is fine, Claire replied. Andrew fell silent, carefully debating whether to agree or not. In the end, he accepted. He had always been someone who helped others, and his Aunt Claire rarely asked him for favors. All right, I'll be there. What do you need me for? Andrew asked. Haley is bringing a boy over, I think he's her new boyfriend. His name is Dylan, and I only just found out about all of this today, Claire said, clicking her tongue in annoyance. Her eldest daughter had gotten very good at hiding things like this. Claire used to catch on despite Haley's attempts to keep secrets, but now it seemed her daughter had leveled up her stealth game. I need someone to intimidate this boy, I don't trust Phil. He'll just try to be his friend and win him over, Claire added. She could only trust Andrew for this task. In some of Haley's previous boyfriend situations, she'd asked him for similar help, and it worked well. Andrew was tall, athletic, and the captain of the football team back when he was in middle school. He had even taken charge of many athletic students on the team who used to be bullies, putting them in their place and instilling discipline in them as if they'd joined the military. All right, I'll be there, Andrew said, and the call ended. He was already used to playing this role every now and then to intimidate one of Haley's boyfriends. Usually, he didn't have to do much, just sit there silently with a poker face. That was more than enough. I'll wake up in 5 minutes, Andrew thought, burying his head into his pillow. Unfortunately for him, 2 minutes later, his phone started ringing again. Ringing, ringing, ringing. Yeah, Andrew answered after nearly a minute, his tone exasperated. Why was he getting so many calls today? Of all days, the one time he didn't stick to his sleep routine and went to bed at 7 in the morning. Andresito, mi niño. Where have you been? Why weren't you answering? A loud and commanding feminine voice came from the phone, making Andrew wince slightly as the sound blasted into his right ear. Gloria, why so early? Andrew replied, wondering if his entire family planned to call him today. His grandfather Jay had married Gloria 6 months ago. An unforgettable wedding, not for the reasons people might think. Oh, please, early, it's noon. Besides, I have a surprise for you. You're coming to Manny's game this afternoon. Isn't that exciting? Gloria said, already deciding that Andrew would attend, despite him just hearing about it. The game, fine, I'll go. What time? Andrew asked, resigning himself to his sleepless fate for the day. That's what I like to hear, Andresito. I'll see you at 3. Don't be late, or I'll send Jay to wake you up. Gloria said cheerfully before hanging up. With no other choice, Andrew got out of bed and started getting dressed. He glanced at Leonard and Howard, both still fast asleep. Leonard had drool at the corner of his mouth and was lightly snoring, while Howard had his face buried under a pillow. As he was tying his sneakers, that cursed phone started ringing again. He quickly answered, not bothering to hide his frustration. What? Andrew said, his tone slightly annoyed. It seemed like the universe was conspiring to irritate him today. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a feminine voice that sounded slightly hurt and offended. Why are you talking to me like that? Are you mad at me? Andrew blinked, recognizing the voice after a few seconds. Veronica, he replied, surprised. It was the first time he'd spoken to her over the phone, and he realized how different a voice could sound through the line. Yes, who else? Veronica said, still a little offended. Oh, sorry, I thought you were an annoying telemarketer or something, Andrew explained. Thankfully, Veronica let out a soft laugh and didn't take it personally. Well, I'm not a telemarketer, but I was wondering if you'd like to do something this afternoon. You know, spend some time together as a couple, Veronica said, hesitating slightly. Andrew glanced at the clock, calculating his schedule. He had to go to his aunt and uncle's in a few minutes, then attend Manny's game later, and finally be home when his parents returned with his new baby sister. Somewhere in between all that, he still needed to fit in his football training. To top it off, he knew his dad, Cameron, was planning to host a family dinner to introduce Lily to everyone, a surprise he hadn't shared with Mitchell yet, who hadn't told Claire or Jay about adopting a baby. His time was limited today, but skipping his training wasn't an option. Well, actually, I have to go to a game this afternoon. You could come with me, if you want, Andrew suggested. Football game? Veronica asked. Not football, soccer, Andrew clarified. Oh, well, that'll be fun, Veronica said, realizing it was soccer and not football. That meant Andrew wouldn't be as focused on the game, leaving more room to pay attention to her, since he was a fan of football, not soccer. They chatted a little more, arranging where they would meet, and the call ended. Andrew stared at the wall, questioning how the one day he'd tried to sleep outside of his usual schedule, the universe had conspired to keep him awake. If he wasn't going to rest, neither would his friends. He glanced at Howard and Leonard, both still in a deep sleep. Howard was tangled in the sheets, a pillow covering his face. Leonard, on the other hand, was snoring peacefully, one arm stretched awkwardly upward. Andrew smirked slightly and, wasting no time, strode over to the window. He yanked the curtain open, flooding the room with bright sunlight. The light hit Leonard square in the face, causing him to wince immediately, mumbling something unintelligible as he tried to shield his eyes. Howard, on the other hand, let out a muffled groan, burrowing deeper under the pillow as if it could protect him from the harsh reality. Wake up, sleeping beauties, Andrew called out in a cheerful yet firm tone. We've got to head to my aunt and uncle's house. Why can't you just let us sleep a little longer? Howard grumbled from beneath the safety of his pillow. Oh, didn't I mention? Haley's going to be there, Andrew said in a suggestive tone. Howard peeked out from under the pillow. Did you say, Haley? He asked, suddenly much more alert. That's right, Andrew confirmed, holding back a laugh. You know, if you'd rather stay here and sleep, I won't stop you. Maybe we'll just play a board game with her, and you guys can get to know each other, or, he trailed off. I guess a little fresh air wouldn't hurt, Leonard said, trying to act indifferent. He got up, and in less than 5 minutes, he was ready to go. Howard followed suit, even faster than Leonard. When are we leaving? Howard asked, realizing that being friends with Andrew was already paying off. He'd get the chance to visit Haley's house, one of the most popular and beautiful girls in their grade. Right after a protein shake. Quick and nutritious, Andrew replied as he left the room, followed by Leonard and Howard. 3-3 comments 0 vote. Pilot 2. Pedal, Howard, Andrew exclaimed, sitting up straight with his arms crossed in the back seat of the bike, perfectly balanced. He casually observed the scenery, as if he didn't even feel the rocking of the bike. In front, Howard was pedaling with an expression of suffering, sweating as the sun beat down on his face. The combination of heat and the weight of Andrew wasn't exactly light, and every pedal stroke felt like punishment. He had never been great at physical education, and physical activity always seemed more like torture than anything else. Leonard, on the other hand, had luck on his side. He was riding another bike without having to carry anyone. Andrew only had 2 bikes, so he had no choice but to impose this arrangement. He could have taken Howard's place, of course, but he decided that a bit of exercise wouldn't hurt his friend. It's about time he feels the satisfaction of pushing his limits, Andrew thought with a slight smile. Come on, Howard, Haley's waiting for us, Andrew cheered, and as if by magic, Howard sped up. It was clear that just mentioning Haley acted like extra fuel. Finally, after a few kilometers, they reached the Dunphys house. Andrew examined the details of the facade, identical to the one from the TV show. Howard dropped the bike the moment they hit the sidewalk, collapsing on the ground while gasping for air, his gaze fixed on the sky, breathing heavily. Andrew, on the other hand, jumped off gracefully before the bike even touched the ground, landing with the elegance of someone who hadn't moved a muscle. With a smile, Andrew leaned toward Howard. "See, there's nothing like the rewarding feeling of pushing your limits, Howard. This will make you stronger," he said, giving him a pat on the shoulder. "Imagine the muscle gain, the cardiovascular endurance," Andrew added, muttering to himself. "Damn workout freak," Howard thought, but said nothing, as he was still recovering. While Howard was catching his breath, Andrew noticed Leonard pull an inhaler from his pocket and take a deep puff. "Oh, right, I forgot about that," Andrew thought, walking over to Leonard. He had forgotten that Leonard had asthma. "Are you okay, Leonard?" Andrew asked with concern. "Yeah, it was just a bit of exercise," Leonard replied, catching his breath. Unlike Howard, he didn't have to carry extra weight like Andrew, and he wasn't forced to increase his speed on certain stretches, so he took it at his own pace. "How long have you been using it?" Andrew asked, referring to the inhaler. "Since I was 6, Leonard answered. I see. In the future, the exercise I'll give you will be more considerate," Andrew said with an apologetic expression, gently patting Leonard's shoulder. Leonard looked at him with a stunned expression. "I don't want to train with you," Leonard complained internally, but he didn't say anything. Now he understood why his school always won the district championships and why Andrew was so good at football. "Let's go," Andrew said, walking toward the front door. He rang the doorbell and waited. Howard and Leonard stood nervously behind him. They hadn't expected to visit Haley's house today. "Phil, help Luke get his head out of the stairs," Claire exclaimed, stopping what she was doing to prepare lunch and heading toward the door. Phil, absorbed in his phone, looked up and replied, "Where's the baby oil?" "I don't know, find it," Claire shouted, exasperated, as she moved to open the door. When she opened it, she smiled widely upon seeing Andrew. "Andrew, finally you arrive," she said with relief, convinced that with him there, she'd have an ally when Haley's boyfriend showed up. "Hey, Aunt, we took a little longer because we made some detours," Andrew said with a smile. This bastard, Leonard and Howard thought indignantly as they remembered the route. Now it all made sense. The zigzag path wasn't to avoid traffic, but to force them to get more physical exercise. Claire raised an eyebrow upon seeing the two unfamiliar boys standing behind Andrew. She gave them a quick once-over. They both looked like stereotypical nerds from movies. Howard, wearing a Flash t-shirt, was short, with hair styled like Ringo Starr in a small frame. Leonard, still holding his inhaler, wore large glasses and had a sweaty t-shirt with damp stains under his arms. "And who are these guys?" Claire asked, casting a quick, inquisitive glance at Andrew. "Did you join a science club and not tell me?" The guy with the glasses reminded her a bit of her youngest daughter, Alex. "Oh, they're my friends. This is Howard, and the one who looks like he's about to collapse is Leonard," Andrew said with a smile, patting Leonard's shoulder. "I think he needs a glass of water," Andrew whispered to Claire, who nodded slightly. "Hello, Mrs. Dunphy," both of them greeted in unison, somewhat shy under Claire's curious gaze. Claire returned the greeting and invited them in. The first thing they saw upon entering was a boy about 10 years old, probably younger, whose head was trapped between the bars of the railing. His expression was calm, as if he was used to it. His arms hung limply as he looked around and noticed the guests. "Andrew," Luke exclaimed with a smile. "Hey, Luke, stuck again," Andrew said with a slight smile, roughly ruffling Luke's curly hair. "Yeah, I was defeated, again," Luke replied with a sigh. "Defeated? By the stairs? Again?" Leonard and Howard thought, exchanging incredulous looks as they tried to process the scene. Claire gave the boys a nervous smile and shrugged. "This is my son, Luke. Let's just say he has a pretty, active imagination," she explained. "Hey, Luke, I bet you're tougher now. What if we try getting your head out without the oil? Remember, no pain, no gain," Andrew suggested. This way, in the future, Luke could get out without anyone's help. He'd finally defeat the stairs on his own. Pass," Luke murmured, remembering the last time Andrew helped him by pulling him out forcibly. The experience had been, in Luke's words, traumatically painful. He wasn't willing to relive that. "Come on, show some courage. It won't hurt as much as last time," Andrew said, heading to the other side to pull. "Dad," Luke started shouting, twisting his head as much as he could and directing his voice upstairs, "Dad, come quickly, please." Luckily for Luke, hurried footsteps were heard from upstairs, and Phil appeared with a bottle of oil in his hand. "I got it, champ. Baby oil to the rescue," Phil said with a smile as he came down. "Thank goodness," Luke murmured, sighing in relief at seeing that Andrew wouldn't yank him out roughly. "Such a shame," Andrew thought, shrugging. "Oh, hey, Andy. Is one of them Dylan?" Phil asked as he began the rescue procedure for Luke, applying generous amounts of oil around the boy's ears. Claire didn't respond, as her comment would have been too rude. She would have said, "Do you really think Haley would go out with either of these two nerds?" She didn't have anything against these two boys, but seeing her oldest daughter interested in one of them seemed, well, unlikely. "No, Phil, neither of them is Dylan. This is Leonard, and this is Howard," Andrew said, pointing to each with a slight nod of his head. "They're my friends." Leonard and Howard instinctively straightened up, as if those words filled them with unexpected pride. It was the second time Andrew had called them his friends, and there was something really comforting about it, like they had finally leveled up in their social life. Phil put the baby oil down and extended his arms to give them an enthusiastic handshake. "Phil Dunphy, dude. Nice to meet you," Leonard and Howard responded in unison, noticing how their hands were slightly oily after the handshake. Phil's comment, "I'm the cool dad," or in this case, the cool uncle. "With Andy and his friends, we always get along. No drama, just good vibes. I'm the head cheerleader," a title he gave himself, "of the team," Phil said with a confident smile. End of comment. While Phil continued with the rescue operation, Andrew, Leonard, and Howard followed Claire into the kitchen. The boys entered the kitchen, where they found a girl around 12 years old, with long straight black hair and large glasses that gave her an expression of unshakable intelligence. She was sitting on a stool, absorbed in a thick book she held with one hand while making meticulous notes with the other. It was Alex, Andrew's younger cousin. Andrew greeted his younger cousin enthusiastically, but she only nodded without even lifting her head. He also introduced Howard and Leonard, but she simply nodded and didn't even glance at them. Claire shot Andrew a conspiratorial look. "You know what we'll do when this Dylan guy shows up," she said, pouring a glass of water for Leonard, who happily accepted it. Yeah, give him threatening looks with our arms crossed, all very intimidating," Andrew replied with a smile, amused by his aunt's intensity. Leonard, who hadn't fully understood what was going on until that moment, turned to Andrew with a confused expression. "Dylan? Who's Dylan?" "Oh, he's Haley's boyfriend," Andrew replied casually, as if it were no big deal. Leonard and Howard exchanged surprised glances, their expressions quickly shifting from confusion to indignation. "Her boyfriend," they both thought, turning to Andrew with accusatory eyes. "Didn't you think that was a small detail to mention before making us pedal all the way over here?" Howard asked, whispering so only Andrew could hear. "I didn't think it was fair to lose sleep by myself. Suffering is better when shared," Andrew said with a slight smile. He was even still very tired. He wouldn't suffer alone. Leonard and Howard exchanged a glance, realizing that Andrew wasn't as innocent as he seemed. "By the way, I heard you got a girlfriend, is that true?" Claire asked, switching to investigative mode. She found out about this through Haley, not because she was told directly, but because she overheard her talking with a friend about Andrew and his new girlfriend. Her oldest daughter didn't seem too happy, which only concerned her. Claire's comment, "I'm so glad to hear that Andrew finally got a girlfriend. It's strange given his situation that he never had one. Very strange, and I was concerned about something, though I guess I don't have to worry about it anymore," Claire said with a relieved smile. End of comment. Alex looked up from her book with a mix of amazement and skepticism in her eyes. "You got a girlfriend? Don't joke," Alex commented, not hiding her doubt. Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Why does that seem so strange to you?" he asked. "Because," Alex closed the book and placed it on the table, looking at him directly. "I don't know, you're the most disciplined and obsessive person I know. Most guys your age who play football do it just to be popular or to get invited to parties. But you're different. You seem more interested in constantly improving in every aspect of football. I can't imagine you having the time or interest in anything other than improving your performance," Alex explained. Over the years, Alex had come to respect Andrew for this obsession, though it was different from hers, it was more about sports. "Wow, I didn't know you saw me as some sort of training maniac," Andrew laughed. "Because you are," everyone in the room said in unison, including Howard and Leonard. Quote. Andrew, it's not a complaint, by the way. Everyone thinks I'm weird for studying so much, so I get that obsession. I'd even say you're more obsessed with your thing than I am with mine. But, a girlfriend, it's like if suddenly someone told me that Haley got an A on her chemistry exam or that she's getting married. Can you imagine, Haley lasting more than a month with a guy, Alex said with a mocking snort. Don't make fun of your sister. But you're right about the other thing. Since when do you have time for dates, Andy? Claire asked, clearly interested in the topic. Andrew began but didn't know how to continue. In reality, he wouldn't have accepted, but the situation required him to say yes so Veronica wouldn't be exposed to rejection in front of everyone. This guy, always so focused on his training, on football, with no time for anything else. But now, it turns out he gets a girlfriend, and she's the one who confessed, not him. Leonard said, thinking aloud and starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. True, during his middle school years, he didn't date anyone, and now, out of nowhere, he has a girlfriend. Very convenient, Howard said, exchanging a knowing look with Leonard. What are you talking about? Alex asked, looking at the two nerds, who reminded her of herself. It seemed strange to her that there were two nerds with Andrew, but she didn't care that much. Well, turns out, Leonard began, telling them about how Veronica confessed her feelings to Andrew. Claire and Alex now understood where Leonard and Howard were going with this. So, it was all because you didn't want to reject her in front of everyone? Claire asked, and everyone looked at him. Of course not, Andrew said, turning his head robotically to look the other way. His movement was unnatural, and his tone of voice was very doubtful. You're lying horribly, everyone thought. That's very mature of you, Andy, Claire said with a proud yet slightly disappointed smile, as her nephew still hadn't gotten a real girlfriend. Claire's comment, my earlier concern is back. Also, if Haley finds out about this, she'll be in a good mood, Claire said, crossing her arms and shaking her head. End of comment. How long are you going to pretend you're dating her? Leonard asked. It'll take time away from your training, Alex said with a slight mocking smile. I don't know, maybe I should act like Howard, and she'll dump me instantly, Andrew said with a thoughtful look. When he referred to acting like Howard, he meant acting desperate. Leonard couldn't hold back a laugh. Hey, show some respect, Howard said. Just then, someone rang the doorbell. It had to be Dylan. 38 comments 0 vote. Pilot 3. The doorbell rang, and Claire stopped what she was doing and rushed to the front door. Andrew had no choice but to follow her. Leonard and Howard followed him. Let's see what idiot Haley is dating. Let's scare him off right away, Howard whispered to Leonard with a mischievous grin. He had taken it upon himself to join the intimidation mission, even though Claire never asked for his help. If he helped Andrew, they could make Haley break up with this Dylan guy sooner, and Haley would remember him as Andrew's cool and bad friend. I've known you for years, and I have no idea where you get that confidence from, Leonard thought, genuinely impressed. He wasn't sure if this confidence was really an asset for Howard. They arrived at the entrance again. Claire was first, followed by Andrew. At that same moment, Haley was hurrying downstairs. She was wearing a short skirt, a black shirt covered in pretty little flowers, and a small violet jacket over it. Howard forgot about meeting Haley's so-called idiot boyfriend, as he had put it, and turned his gaze to his crush, or one of them, since his list of crushes was practically endless. Too late, cousin, you've got to be faster if you want to beat the paranoia, your mom, Andrew said, coughing just before he accidentally let a word slip that was better left unsaid. Luckily, Claire wasn't paying attention. Andy, what are you doing here? Haley asked, slightly surprised, momentarily forgetting that she needed to stop her mom from embarrassing her in front of Dylan. What do you think? Andrew replied. Not this again, Haley said, realizing Claire had called him to intimidate her new boyfriend. It wasn't the first time her mom had used this tactic. In the past, when Claire couldn't show up at school with Haley, she would assign the intimidation task to Andrew. But this was the first time Haley had brought a guy home, so her mom had to call him in, and Haley hadn't expected her mother to stick to this stupid strategy. However, this didn't bother Haley. On the contrary, she liked that her mother insisted on using that tactic. Though she pretended to be indignant, she secretly enjoyed the attention Andrew gave her during these moments. We're not kids anymore, Andrew. I don't need you to do that stupid act. This time with Dylan, it's serious, Haley said with an air of importance, secretly reveling in it. You're not the only one with a couple, she thought. Before Andrew could say anything, Claire had already opened the door. Hello, how are you? You must be Dylan, Claire said, looking the tall boy in front of her up and down while extending her hand. Hi, Dylan. Yeah, said Dylan, shaking hands with the blonde woman in front of him. She seemed like a Kindle woman. He was sure they'd get along well. I'm Haley's mom, Claire clarified. Haley stopped paying attention to Andrew and turned to Dylan. Her top priority was to get Dylan away from her crazy mom as quickly as possible. Hi, come on in, Haley said hurriedly, greeting Dylan and grabbing his hand. She began guiding him toward the stairs, walking past Claire. Andrew observed Dylan, a tall guy with brown hair and eyes, a goatee, and dressed like a cool guy. He really didn't want to make things hard for him. On the show, he liked him and knew that in the end, he and Haley would get married. But this wasn't just a show anymore, it was his life now. There could be differences. Why make things hard for him? Dylan might be a bit dumb, but he was always kind and never said or did anything malicious. Go on, introduce yourself, Howard, Leonard joked quietly to Howard, who was frozen, staring at Dylan, who was easily more than a head taller than him. Shut up, I didn't know she was dating someone older. I haven't hit my growth spurt yet to take him on, Howard justified himself. Claire quickly followed Haley. Hold on a second, she said, grabbing Dylan by the sleeve as he was on the fourth step of the staircase. Dylan, are you still in high school? Claire asked, starting her interrogation. Yeah, I'm starting my senior year tomorrow, Dylan replied, unfazed by the fact that Claire was gripping his wrist tightly. He didn't seem to realize yet how paranoid and overprotective Claire could be. Senior year, great, Claire nodded and looked over at Andrew, widening her eyes to prompt him into action. Oh, right, Andrew thought, taking a few steps forward. The drowsiness was starting to get to him. Andrew, Haley's cousin, he introduced himself, trying to maintain a serious, impassive expression as he extended his hand for a handshake. His face bore the look of someone trying to appear intimidating without being overtly aggressive. Claire, watching from the side, nodded internally, satisfied with Andrew's performance. He wasn't overly friendly, but he wasn't rude either. Oh, Andrew Pritchett, I watched last season's games. You were great, Dylan said enthusiastically, shaking Andrew's hand with a big smile. Huh, murmured Andrew as his serious and intimidating expression shifted to one of confusion. You watched middle school games? Andrew asked. It was unusual for a high schooler to watch middle school games. Of course, a lot of us do because of you. I'm not even a big football fan, but your plays are something else, Dylan replied enthusiastically. Everyone talks about how you won the district championships 2 years in a row. They can't wait to have you on the high school team, Dylan added with a smile. He was a member of the school band, not really his type of music since he was more into rock, but being in a club was fun, so he stayed somewhat informed about sports. In middle school, Andrew had won 2 consecutive district championships, putting him in the regional spotlight. His name was known not just in his school but throughout the youth sports community. During his last year of middle school, his skills had been so exceptional that he was interviewed by a local outlet, something almost unheard of for a student his age. Well, it's a team sport, you know. It wasn't just me, Andrew said, scratching the back of his neck and glancing away as if suddenly finding the spotless floor incredibly interesting. Claire worked hard to keep the house immaculate, despite having 3 kids and a husband like Phil. Dylan didn't seem to notice Andrew's discomfort and kept speaking with the same energy. I also heard about the interview you did last year. It was great. My dad even said that if you keep this up, you could make it to the NFL. Is that true? Is that your dream? Well, that'd be amazing, but for now I'm just focusing on one step at a time, you know. Andrew replied casually, though the slight blush on his cheeks betrayed how flattered he felt. Despite his efforts to maintain composure, a small, satisfied smile crept onto his face. Damn it, his Achilles heel. Claire thought irritably as she noticed Andrew's happy expression. Whenever someone praised him, he lost focus. Do you see yourself in the NFL? That'd be so cool, to say I know someone famous. Dylan added. It's a long way off, Andrew began, feeling increasingly flattered. Haley, who had been silently observing, rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. She knew exactly how Andrew operated. A couple of compliments were all it took for his supposed seriousness to vanish, transforming him into an adorable mess, at least, in her opinion. Andrew, Claire interrupted in a stern tone, as if trying to snap him back to his mission. Her gaze was intense, clearly reminding him to stay focused. Andrew blinked a few times, as if waking from a daydream. "Oh, yeah, of course," he said, clearing his throat and trying to regain his serious demeanor. "Stop siding with my mom, Andrew," Haley said with a frown, pretending to be mad at him. Andrew opened his mouth to respond, but just as he was about to speak, something odd happened. His eyes began to glaze over, turning white, and, to everyone's surprise, he started snoring softly, standing upright, neither swaying nor falling. "Andrew?" Dylan asked, stepping closer to the staircase railing. Leonard, wearing a puzzled expression, tilted his head and examined Andrew. "Is he asleep? Is that biologically possible?" Howard asked, staring at Andrew and listening to his steady breathing. "Well, technically, yes. Horses can do it thanks to a locking mechanism in their hind legs, but humans, I'm not sure we have the anatomy for that. Although, if we consider his level of athletic discipline, maybe his brain has developed an adaptive system," Leonard said, adjusting his glasses. Leonard could tell that Andrew's athletic performance was on another level compared to his peers. He was already an elite youth athlete. Claire looked at Leonard, surprised by his comment. It was exactly what she expected from a nerd, though the fact was rather impressive. "Or maybe he's just so tired that his body said, 'Doesn't matter where you are, buddy, we're sleeping here,'" Howard added, rubbing his chin. From the stairs, Haley let out a long sigh and rolled her eyes. "No, geniuses, it's not evolution or horse stuff. It's his statue mode. It's like his weird way of sleeping standing up when he doesn't get enough rest," Haley explained. Howard raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Statue mode, sounds like something out of a comic book. Let me guess, does he also have a turbo mode for football games? Who knows? We could be witnessing the first documented case of a teenage superhuman," Leonard said with a small smile. "Wait, who the hell are you guys?" Haley asked, finally noticing the two nerds in her house. Leonard Hofstadter, Howard Wolowitz, both introduced themselves, happy to be acknowledged but slightly nervous, although witnessing Andrew's statue mode had made them forget their initial anxiety. Haley nodded slightly, recalling the two nerds from a few days ago at Andrew's house when they were doing a bit of physical exercise. Claire, who had been watching the scene with her arms crossed, sighed and rubbed her temples. Her ally had fallen in battle. Haley was ready to start heading upstairs. Just at that moment, Phil stepped out of one of the doors, putting on a blazer as he made his way toward the front door. He had an engagement tonight. A smile formed on Claire's face. He was her last hope. 34 comments 0 vote. Pilot IV. "Phil, honey, this is Dylan, and he's a senior," Claire said as Phil walked over. He noticed Andrew sleeping on autopilot but didn't think much of it. He'd seen him do it a couple of times before. "Scare him a little," Claire whispered to Phil. Phil looked at Dylan, who stared back at him. Behind Dylan, Haley wanted to bang her head against the wall, but there was nothing she could do at this point. "Let's see what's going on here," Phil said, stepping toward the stairs. "Phil Dunphy, bro," Phil said in a deep voice, raising his fist to bump Dylan's in a laid-back greeting. Phil's commentary. "That's how it's done. You look into his eyes and let your stare do the scaring," Phil said, sitting at the kitchen table, nodding confidently, convinced his intimidating dad act was working. "Your mouth says, 'all good,'" he continued, pointing to his mouth with his index finger, "but your eyes say, 'not at all good,'" he added, now pointing to his eyes. He straightened up and deepened his voice further. "Nice to meet you, not at all." He paused theatrically, glancing at the camera as if waiting for applause, then nodded with satisfaction, sure he'd nailed the art of the protective dad. In trying to mimic a dramatic gesture, he accidentally knocked over his coffee mug. "End of commentary, bro," Dylan repeated, not knowing what else to say. The room fell into an awkward silence for a few seconds until Haley spoke up. "Well, you've met, let's go." Wait, Phil said, climbing a couple more steps to stand taller than Dylan and avoid being at a disadvantage. "You've got to be careful. You get it, right, bro?" Phil asked, trying to sound like he was speaking Dylan's language. Dylan looked at him, blinked a couple of times, and answered with complete sincerity, "No, I don't get it." "Please, stop," Haley said, clenching her fists in frustration. She would have preferred Andrew doing the intimidating over this. Phil smiled, completely ignoring the comment, and said in a light tone, "It's just standard procedure, sweetie," throwing Haley a conspiratorial look, as if he were earning points for Dad of the Year. As he tried to straighten up to appear more imposing, he felt a sharp pain in his back. "Oh, God, my back," Phil exclaimed, wincing as he grabbed at the small of his back. "Ugh, stupid baby oil," he muttered under his breath. Andrew gave a slight start, his snores abruptly ceased, and he blinked a few times as if he'd just returned from another dimension. "What happened? Did I fall asleep?" he asked, looking around and noticing his Uncle Phil writhing in pain for some unknown reason. "Yes, but you did it standing up, like a Jedi in deep meditation." "Impressive, but a bit unsettling," Howard replied. "Oh, rest is key for any physical activity or sport," Andrew commented, yawning slightly. "If it were anyone else saying that, I'd call them lazy, but coming from you, I believe it," Leonard added. "Help, someone carry me to the couch," Phil pleaded, sprawled on the stairs in a pathetic and embarrassing manner. Dylan was about to help his girlfriend's dad, but Andrew beat him to it. "A bit of exercise might help me wake up," Andrew thought as he carried Phil, an adult man weighing over 70 kilograms, like a princess with astonishing ease. Andrew began walking toward the couch carrying Phil, but it wasn't a normal walk. Instead of taking regular steps, he started doing deep lunges, the classic exercise where you step forward with one leg, lower your body while keeping your back straight, then switch to the other leg. Except in this case, he was doing so while carrying an adult male weighing more than 155 pounds. A very effective workout for the lower body and stability. "Andrew, this isn't one of your workouts, it's my back," Phil complained. Claire placed a hand on her forehead and shook her head. Howard and Leonard exchanged glances, realizing they might have underestimated Andrew's obsession with training. His younger cousin, Alex, seemed to understand it well when she remarked that his obsession rivaled her own with studying. "Using injured people as weights. What's next?" Haley murmured in disbelief. She took Dylan's hand and started up the stairs toward her room. Finally, Andrew reached the couch, carefully set Phil down, and, before letting go, performed an exaggeratedly slow deep squat. He laid Phil on his back on the couch and dusted off his hands as if finishing a job well done. "Thanks, I guess this is a 5-star service," Phil said with a faint smile as he settled on the couch. The service had been efficient, quick, and careful, his back hadn't suffered any further damage. Claire walked to the kitchen, paying no more attention to her husband's antics or her peculiar nephew. The mission had been a failure. Haley had gone upstairs to her room with her boyfriend. Claire figured she might have to check on them in a little while to make sure everything was fine. Claire now had to focus on baking a cake to bring for the evening, as they were heading to Andrew's house. Cameron had invited them over for dinner, and for some unknown reason. Meanwhile, Andrew, Leonard, and Howard sat on the couches around Phil to keep him company while he recovered from his back pain. Phil was always chatty and easy to get along with, which allowed Andrew to activate his statue mode, while Leonard and Howard chatted effortlessly with their uncle. After about 20 minutes, Andrew emerged from his Jedi meditation, blinking slowly as if returning from a galaxy far, far away. The first thing he saw was Phil, now fully recovered and bursting with energy, performing a magic trick with a deck of cards he'd pulled out of nowhere. In front of him, Howard watched in fascination, while Leonard played the role of an attentive spectator. How did they hit it off so quickly? Andrew thought, genuinely impressed. He was familiar with this side of Howard thanks to the Big Bang Theory and knew Phil was naturally enthusiastic about anything involving magic. Still, he had expected at least one more conversation before they reached this level of synchronization. "And voila, here's your card," Phil exclaimed, pulling a card from behind Leonard's ear. Leonard looked at the card in surprise. It was his, the 5 of spades. "It is," Leonard confirmed, examining the card with a smile, clearly impressed by the trick. At that moment, Alex walked into the living room, her expression disapproving as she took in the magic show. She couldn't fathom how an adult and 2 guys older than her could enjoy childish magic tricks designed to confuse and intrigue fools. If Alex had known Leonard had an IQ of 173, she might have thought differently about the magic tricks. "Dad," Alex interrupted in the middle of one of Howard's tricks. "It's time," she added, glancing at the clock. "Oh, it's time for that," Phil said, his tone and expression suddenly serious. "Time for what?" Andrew asked. Time for Luke to take his punishment, Alex replied with a spiteful look and showing Andrew her arm. On her arm was a shot mark. Andrew nodded, recalling the plot of the pilot episode. The memories were hazy since he hadn't written them down in a notebook. It had been 10 years since he transmigrated into this body, and as for the show's storyline, he didn't care much about it. It was all just slices of life, nothing serious. It wasn't like he had to stop Voldemort's return and destroy Horcruxes to prevent his resurrection or anything dramatic like that. We're heading out. Let's hope the criminal gets the punishment he deserves, Andrew said. They said goodbye to Claire, Phil, and Alex and left the house, returning to Andrew's place on their bikes. This time, Andrew pedaled with Leonard riding behind him, while Howard followed close behind. They took a direct route, arriving much faster than the first time. When they got to Andrew's house, Howard and Leonard packed up their belongings into their backpacks. About 10 minutes later, Mrs. Wallowitz arrived to give Leonard a ride home. Leonard and Howard felt a little sad. They had really enjoyed these past 2 days with Andrew. Even his family was a lot of fun. The silver lining was that school started tomorrow, and they would see him there, though they weren't sure if he'd hang out with them, given that they were two nerds, and he was a popular athlete. I have almost an hour to train a bit, Andrew thought, checking the time. After that, he'd need to head to Manny's game with Veronica. I hope Gloria doesn't get too enthusiastic when she meets Veronica. She'll only make the situation more embarrassing, he thought while grabbing the football and heading to the backyard to practice his throws. The embarrassing part was that he was going out with Veronica only because he couldn't turn her down in front of everyone, and he really didn't want Gloria to make them do anything awkward. Today, Sunday, his training focused on precision rather than physical exhaustion, as training intensely every day wasn't good for the body. Muscles needed time to recover, so he concentrated on improving his throws. After 45 minutes, he was done. He took a quick shower and grabbed a bite to eat before heading out. Andrew arrived just in time at the spot where he was supposed to meet Veronica, but what he saw upon arrival made him furrow his brow slightly. Standing next to her was a middle-aged man with a stern expression and arms crossed. Judging by the similar dark hair and eyes, it had to be her father. Oh, great, now I'm in Dylan's shoes, Andrew thought as he approached Veronica. She greeted him with a wide smile and walked toward him, her father following closely behind. 21 comments 0 vote. Pilot V. Veronica stopped near Andrew, unsure of how to greet him. It would be odd to kiss him with her father standing right behind her, his intimidating expression ever present, especially since her relationship with Andrew was only a few days old. Hi, Andy, Veronica greeted him with a bit of shyness, very different from her usual self, always confident and with a hint of arrogance. Andy, Andrew thought, confused. Only his family called him that in such a, let's say childish way, as if he were 5 years old again. Not that he ever felt that age mentally, but he couldn't afford to lose focus and get lost in his thoughts now. Hi, Veronica, Andrew replied, somewhat stiff but maintaining a friendly tone. Veronica was dressed in a black and white outfit. She wore an elegant white silk blouse, paired with a skirt that Claire would undoubtedly say was far too short, similar to the ones Haley liked to wear. She also had on black shoes, some accessories like rings, and a handbag that looked very expensive. As Veronica was about to say something, she heard her father cough several times. He was not one to be overlooked. Oh, yes, this is my father, Hiram. Father, this is Andrew, Veronica said with an expression that clearly reflected something between annoyance and resignation. Hiram was about the same height as Phil, but his face lacked the warmth of him uncle's. He had a furrowed brow, a tense expression, and piercing eyes. On top of that, he was dressed in a shirt and dress pants on a Sunday, which gave him an even more serious appearance. Why did he have to accompany her? She wasn't 10 years old, and she was going out with Andrew, who was well known across the district. He wasn't a creep or anything like that. Hiram simply stared at Andrew, who stared back while resting a hand on his chin. It wasn't a sign of defiance, he was merely studying how someone should look when trying to intimidate their daughter's boyfriend. I need to practice my furrowed brow and tense jaw for the next time Claire asks me to do this. I could also share this with Phil, he'll need it someday, Andrew thought. Pleasure to meet you, Andrew said in a friendly tone, extending his hand for a handshake. I've heard a lot about you. 2 district championships in a row, huh? Hiram said, gripping Andrew's hand with a firm shake as Andrew nodded. 2 big tournaments, but don't let it go to your head. Got it, son? Hiram asked, tightening his grip on Andrew's hand. Hiram wasn't referring to Andrew's athletic success. He meant he shouldn't mess with his daughter's feelings or date other girls just because he was the popular athlete. Andrew's instinctive response would have been, "No, I don't get it at all." But he knew better than to repeat Dylan's mistake. "Yes, I understand," Andrew said with a serious expression, lowering his voice to sound deeper. "It's good that you understand," Hiram said, tightening his handshake further. However, Andrew's expression showed no sign of pain or discomfort. Was he doing the pressure wrong? For the first time, Andrew felt a slight discomfort and glanced down at the handshake, which was lasting far longer than he liked. Is he trying to prove something? Some kind of game, Andrew thought, his face showing a puzzled expression. Thinking it was some sort of challenge, Andrew decided to increase the pressure of his grip as well. Hiram's reaction was immediate, a slight grimace of pain that he managed to partially hide. What the hell, Hiram thought, surprised by Andrew's strength. Perhaps if he had witnessed Andrew carrying Phil while doing lunges, he wouldn't have attempted this. Hiram managed to keep his composure, and finally, the handshake ended. "We need to get to the game. We're going to be late," Andrew said, checking the time on his phone. If they were even a minute late, Gloria would call him out on it, saying it was enough time to miss one of Manny's masterful plays. "I'll drive you," Hiram said, leaving no room for argument. So, the three of them got into a brand new SUV parked not far away. Andrew and Veronica sat in the back. It felt a bit like having their own chauffeur. It was strange, but Veronica clearly didn't want to sit up front with her father. Instead, she wanted to talk with Andrew. Andrew remembered that Veronica was the rich kid in their grade. Even though their school was public, not all families who sent their children there were on the same economic level. However, her family wasn't rich to the level of millionaires, but they could definitely afford to send Veronica to a private school like Ridge School, a school Andrew had faced and beaten multiple times in football matches. The drive was short since they weren't far away. Still, during that brief ride, Veronica told Andrew all about her day and even what she had done yesterday. The speed at which she spoke was incredible, and yet everything she said was perfectly clear. She sounded like a parrot. The game was being played on a grass field, not a professional one, as that would be far too large for 10-year-olds. Each end had a goal with 3 posts and a net. In the center of the field was a large circle with a smaller one painted in the middle. Andrew noticed Manny's team huddled together, with the coach discussing the strategy they would use to try and win this game. If they could even dream of such a thing, considering they hadn't won a single match last year. Around the field's edges, parents were either seated on chairs they had brought or sitting on the grass, as there were no bleachers. Andrew, Veronica, and Hiram walked across the grass toward the crowd waiting for the game to begin. Veronica was nervous because she had just found out that someone in Andrew's family was playing in this game. She hadn't expected to meet part of his family so soon. "Is it your cousin playing the game?" Veronica asked. She was friends with Haley, so she knew Andrew shouldn't have any cousins besides Haley, Alex, and Luke. But if it wasn't a cousin, who could it be? "No, it's my uncle," Andrew replied with a strange expression. "Your uncle," Veronica murmured in confusion. The kids on the soccer field all looked about 10 years old at most. What sense did that make? Could his uncle be the bald, bearded man coaching the team? Before Andrew could explain, a loud female voice shouted, grabbing everyone's attention. "Andresito, over here, here," yelled Gloria, who was standing a few meters away, waving her hand to make sure Andrew noticed her. Though, with her powerful shout, it was impossible for him not to. Andrew raised his hand and waved back with a smile as he walked toward Gloria and Jay, who was slumped in a low chair, basking in the sun like a senior citizen. Gloria greeted Andrew by showering his cheeks with kisses and roughly tousling his hair. "You're getting taller every day, mi niño," Gloria said, finishing her enthusiastic greeting. "You can read 15 chapters in advance on my Patreon. Link. Web links at trian.com/nave07.